Chapter 766. Everyone was stunned. They stared at the scene in front of them with their mouths agape. It was a 3-meter-tall giant with a head full of thick, black hair. The muscles on his body were like that of a horned dragon, filled with explosive power. The cloth on his body was torn, and there was a huge hole in his chest. That hole penetrated through his body, and rainbow-colored blood vessels hung down like chains. The chains that extended from the Taoye's heart were actually these blood vessels. The blood vessels broke, and one by one they drooped down, with energy gushing out. Roar! The giant roared, and half of his body emerged from the crack of the 9 steps of culinary arts. His face was as thin as a match, and he looked like a bag of bones. His entire body looked ferocious, and the skin on his body stuck to his muscles. His blood vessels were bulging out. He looked extremely terrifying. This was originally a giant that exuded a terrifying aura. Waves of energy surged into the sky, and sand and rocks flew everywhere. The giant's eyes were filled with savagery. He roared and stared at Bufang, letting out a loud roar. Bufang clutched his chest, and he grabbed the Black Turtle Constellation Walk with one hand. Within the Black Turtle Constellation Walk was the throbbing Taoye's heart. From the looks of it, this Taoye's heart originally belonged to this giant. However, the Taoye's heart should belong to the Taotai. Why would it appear on this giant's chest? Bufang stared at the giant's face carefully, and the corners of his mouth twitched. He could not help but recognize this person. It was similar to the light figure from before. Obviously, this giant was the light figure from before, the one who recommended the Taoye's heart to Bufang. He was also the one who schemed against Bufang. If not for Bufang's miraculous encounter, he would have long been sucked dry. Thus, when he thought of this, Bufang did not have the slightest bit of sympathy for this giant. If not for this giant scheming against him, Bufang would not have plucked the Taoye's heart from his chest. The identity of this giant was naturally extraordinary. Many people seemed to have guessed it. Their eyes flickered and they sucked in a breath of cold air. Chu Chongqing was bewildered, standing at his spot. Looking at the giant, his eyes were shivering. This giant was the personal guard of the first Valley Master of the Valley of Gluttony. Many people recognized this iconic figure. Back then, the first Valley Master of the Valley of Gluttony had killed the Black Taotai, sealed the White Taotai, established the Valley of Gluttony, and suppressed many holy lands of the hidden Dragon Royal Court. This giant was the right-hand man of the Valley of Gluttony's master, the peerless expert of the past. Had it actually deteriorated to such a state? Furthermore, he actually coveted the Taoye's heart. He actually wanted to transform his own heart into the Taoye's heart. The Taoye's heart was the inheritance of the Valley of Gluttony. It was controlled by every generation of the Valley Master of the Valley of Gluttony. It could strengthen the Valley Master's cultivation, heal his injuries, and increase his culinary talent. It could be said that the Taoye's heart was the best inheritance. However, at some point in time, the inheritance of the Taoye's heart was severed and disappeared. From then on, the Valley of Gluttony began to decline. No one would have thought that all of this was caused by the hero who had founded the Valley of Gluttony. However, Chu Chongqing could also guess that if it wasn't for the Taoye's heart, this giant would have long been ground to dust by the passage of time. However, this still could not get rid of the sin of coveting the Taoye's heart, which led to the decline of the Valley of Gluttony. The giant's ice-cold eyes instantly locked onto Bufang, who was floating in front of him. He could feel the aura of the Taoye's heart. Hand over the Taoye's heart. The giant opened his mouth and let out a roar. His voice trembled, causing the entire space to tremble. Bufang coldly looked at the giant. If it wasn't for this giant scheming against him, how could he have snatched the Taoye's heart away? The corners of Bufang's mouth curled into a cold smile. He raised his hand and pointed at the giant. Then, with a flip of his hand, he kept the Taoye's heart. After losing the aura of the Taoye's heart, the giant went berserk. He stretched his neck, raised his head, and let out a wail. That wail was filled with sorrow and resentment. In the next instant, a terrifying aura emanated from the giant's body. Rumble! The giant raised his hand, hovering above Bufang's head. It was as if he wanted to smash Bufang into pieces. Without the Taotia's heart, the giant's body would quickly decay. Without the nourishment of the Taotia's heart's life force, he would quickly die because his life force was completely exhausted. He didn't want to die. He had occupied the Taotia's heart for so long, all for the sake of survival. However, today, he had no choice but to awaken. Roar! Die! The giant howled, and his howl was filled with indescribable sorrow. This sorrow affected the crowd, and many of them felt a sense of sorrow. This was a kind of power. This giant could actually casually release a power that could affect one's state of mind. It was extremely terrifying. Bufang's face was pale, and his body was swaying slightly. He had overexerted himself. Facing that sky-covering palm, his body seemed to be unable to move. However, he wasn't afraid. He had the invincibility of the vermilion robe, and he could block one move. However, after one move, how could he block a second move? Thinking about this, Bufang felt a slight headache. Boom! Boom! Suddenly, this palm landed with a loud bang, and the air became stagnant at this moment. The huge pressure caused the giant boulders to crumble. Buzz! Just as Bufang's brows were furrowed, a figure suddenly appeared beside Bufang, and a small hand grabbed onto Bufang's shoulder. With a swoosh, the figure disappeared on the spot. In the next instant, the figure appeared beside Xiaoya. Xiaoya hugged onto Bufang's thigh, and her eyes were closed as she leaned her head on it. She was filled with enjoyment. Bufang patted Xiaoya's head. He knew who had saved him. It should be Hua, who had been sticking to Xiaoya. Indeed, beside Bufang, Hua's figure floated in the air. Her triflower snake eyes were filled with solemnity and anger. Hua's appearance was rather cute. Her hair was tied up in a ponytail, and she wore a golden dress that revealed her plump legs. Her small round face still had baby fat, and there were two small golden horns on her head. Bufang couldn't associate this cute little girl with the violent seven-colored sky-devouring python. However, at this moment, Bufang felt that he shouldn't be concerned about these things. Instead, he was concerned about the giant who had lost the Taotia's heart. This giant's strength was extremely terrifying. Every move he made would cause the sky to be filled with ruins. He was howling, and that howl made many who heard it cry. Of course, those who were truly mentally strong would naturally not be affected by this aura. Following his howl, many people walked toward the giant with tears streaming down their faces. They were affected by the giant, and their minds were affected. They cried as they walked. It was as though they had seen something tragic. Suddenly, as those who were slightly weaker walked closer to the giant's body trembled. The giant's head of jet-black hair swayed, and a ferocious glint appeared in his eyes. He raised his hand, and with a slap, he caught a few figures. Grabbing these figures, he stuffed them into his empty chest. Those experts were jolted awake. As they were stuffed into their chests, the rainbow-colored chains on their chests seemed to come alive, and they wrapped around these figures. A terrifying suction force was produced, and these people were sucked dry. Everyone who was affected was jolted awake, and they let out cries of fear. This time, they were really scared to the point of peeing their pants. Those experts who were sucked dry had no more blood, vitality, or life force. They directly turned into ugly human jerky. Boom! The giant seemed to have tasted the sweetness. He crazily shifted his target to those who were running away. A moment later, he slapped again and again. Grabbing figures, he stuffed them into his chest, as though he wanted to fill the hole in his chest. Chu Chongqing felt so cold. How could the protector of the Valley of Gluttony become such a terrifying existence? He had led to the destruction of the Valley of Gluttony, and now, he was as brutal as a savage beast. Many experts had died. Facing this giant, under its terrifying pressure, they couldn't run far. They all turned into human jerky on their chests. After being sucked dry, they were thrown away by the chains, falling on the ground and shattering in the distance. Emolyoji and the others took in a breath of cold air. At his peak, this giant was in existence at the sect master level with the divine flame ignited. But now, he had become a dried corpse, sucking the essence of experts. He was the culprit who had led to the destruction of the Valley of Gluttony. Emolyoji's eyes flashed. The heavenly secret Holy Land was known to know everything in the world, but that was under the control of Granny Mo and the heavenly secret Saint Sovereign's heavenly secret star compass. How could Emolyoji and the other disciples know such secrets? Their star compass couldn't calculate it at all. Even if it could, it would be a strenuous and unrewarding task. Hence, Emolyoji was also very curious about such secret. At this moment, Amethyst Elder didn't care about the giant. His eyes were fixed on Hades Era, who was holding a brick and smashing his head until it was swollen. His murderous aura was all concentrated on Erha. White Shark in Bylentian's eyes flashed. White Shark cared about the shrimp ancestor that had been turned into Xiao Bai's mount at his peak. He was on par with the Black Dragon King. He was the overlord of the Endless Sea region. Now, after being destroyed, he was in such a pitiful state. He felt that he needed to do something. If the shrimp ancestor obtained it later, it would remember him and give him enough opportunities. Hence, White Shark wasn't in a hurry to snatch the Taotia's heart. He was the same as Bylentian. They had condensed their divine altar, but they couldn't ignite their divine flames. Their goal this time was to obtain the Taotia's heart. It could help them ignite their divine flames and reach the divine spirit realm. However, there were too many unforeseen events this time. White Shark found the shrimp ancestor. With the shrimp ancestor, why would he still need the Taotia's heart? Hence, White Shark's eyes were filled with passion. He carried his meat knife and walked to Xiao Bai's side. He looked at the shrimp ancestor and grinned foolishly. Xiao Bai's gray eyes flashed. In the next instant, he swung his rod. Such an ugly smile. He definitely wasn't a good person. Bylentian's body swayed, and her eyes flashed. The appearance of the giant was completely out of her expectations. She was injured by the Valley Master of the Valley of Gluttony. However, that Valley Master had disappeared for a long time. Originally, she wanted to come back to take revenge. However, she encountered the appearance of the Taotia's heart. If she could obtain the Taotia's heart, she would be able to ignite her divine flame. Naturally, she couldn't resist such a temptation. Hence, she wouldn't give up on the Taotia's heart. Bylentian's eyes narrowed. Energy lotuses appeared around her body. The petals danced in the air, and her hair fluttered in the wind. Her killing intent was overflowing, and there was a hint of beauty in it. Her gaze was locked onto Bufang. The Taotia's heart was with this kid. Suddenly, her eyes narrowed. That was because after the giant had replenished enough energy, he turned his body. His huge hand swept out once again, and he grabbed at Bufang's position. He wanted to grab Bufang like those experts who were sucked dry by him. An oppressive gust of wind blew over, and Bufang's hair fluttered in the wind. Hua's small hand pressed on Bufang's shoulder. Her triflower snake eyes started to spin, and energy started to dissipate from her body. However, just as she was about to transform into the seven-colored sky-devouring python, Bufang raised his hand and patted her head. He rubbed her head. "You're just a kid. Stay here obediently. Leave the fighting and killing to that lazy dog." Bufang rubbed Hua's head, causing Hua's body to stiffen. Her triflower snake eyes turned sluggish. As soon as Bufang's words fell, the space in front of him started to tremble violently. In the next instant, a crack appeared in the void, a pitch-black, unadorned netherworld ship slowly sailed out of it. Chapter 767. A netherworld ship tore through the void. When the pitch-black hull of the ship emerged from the crack, It instantly attracted everyone's attention. Bufang naturally saw the netherworld ship. Not only did he see it, but he also had a premonition in his heart. Hua had originally planned to make a move, but after Bufang patted his head, all the energy he gathered dispersed. He was a little dumbfounded. His small face was filled with doubt as he looked at Bufang. It was as if he didn't understand the actions of this human. Many people's eyes shrank as they looked in the direction of the crack in the void. The moment the netherworld ship appeared, dense nether energy spread out. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Even Amethyst Elder, who was facing off against Hades Era, and Bai Liantian and the others, who were in the distance, tensed up. Their eyes were filled with disbelief. This was because they were very familiar with this nether energy. It was actually the aura of the netherworld creatures. Netherworld ship. That was a netherworld ship from the netherworld. From the crack in the void, a netherworld ship actually slowly emerged. What exactly was going on? The creatures of the netherworld could appear in the hidden dragon continents so brazenly? Rumble. Energy trembled, and the void cracked. The netherworld ship emerged from the void, causing an intense storm. The storm swept out, causing a dense pressure to spread out. Hades Era, who was holding a pitch-black spicy strip in his hand, seemed to have sensed this aura. He immediately turned his head to look and saw the netherworld ship in the void. His eyes slightly lit up. This familiar netherworld ship caused the corners of his mouth to involuntarily curl up. Oh, an old friend was about to appear. Hades Era's heart shook. The netherworld ship was controlled by the netherworld woman. Now that it appeared here, it meant that the netherworld woman had appeared here. Of course, it was very possible that the lazy dog would also appear. Hence, Hades Era didn't continue to target Amethyst Elder. Instead, he turned his body and looked at the netherworld ship. The netherworld ship soared into the sky, emitting a monstrous nether energy. Its unbridled appearance caused many people to be extremely shocked. Roar. The giant roared, and the muscles on its body bulged. It opened its mouth and let out a heart-wrenching roar. The sound waves caused by the roar reverberated and spread out in all directions. The giant's heart was empty. Energy and vitality gathered there, constantly providing energy to the giant. The giant had an instinctive hostility towards the underworld ship. It let out an angry roar, intending to shatter the underworld ship. On the deck of the netherworld ship stood a graceful figure. That figure had a beautiful figure and was incomparably tall. Her black dress fluttered in the wind, exposing her fair and straight legs to the air, attracting the attention of countless people. This was a peerlessly beautiful figure. Her long black hair fluttered in the wind, causing everyone to involuntarily be intoxicated. This was the figure of the netherworld ship. Nethery's eyes were indifferent. Her pitch-black pupils scanned the void, and soon, they landed on Bufang. She saw Bufang, and Bufang saw her. Bufang was expressionless. You pouted and nodded at Bufang. Hua Er's eyes narrowed as she stared at the netherworld woman. Her body emitted a golden energy, and she was extremely vigilant. She looked at you, who was standing on the netherworld ship, then at Bufang. She took a deep breath. Many people were attracted by Yu's beauty. Even Bai Liantian, who had always been confident in her beauty, was stunned when she saw Yu. However, lotus flowers quickly floated around her. These lotus flowers revolved and emitted a vast amount of energy. Although Yu was beautiful, the sense of danger she felt was extremely intense. Moreover, this was a netherworld creature. Furthermore, according to Bai Liantian's intuition, this woman was definitely not an ordinary netherworld creature. The giant roared. He raised his hand and continued to slap Bufang. He wanted to turn Bufang into minced meat with a single slap and take back the Taotia's heart. However, the netherworld ship roared and collided with the giant's body. The giant's body was forced back by the collision. Yu's long black hair fluttered in the wind, and her eyes were completely shrouded in darkness. Nethery's slender and fair legs strode forward. She soared into the air, intending to compete with the giant. However, you quickly stopped moving. This was because a lazy figure was slowly climbing out of the underworld ship behind her. It was a dog, a black and fat dog. Bufang looked at the Lord Go, who had stood up from the netherworld ship. The corners of his mouth curled up, and his tensed heart heaved a sigh of relief. He did not think that this lazy dog would actually appear. The giant roared, and his eyes were filled with ruthlessness. He did not have a good impression of you and the fat dog in the sky. Vitality circulated in the giant's chest. Soon, colorful energy gushed out from the giant's mouth and nose. He raised his fist, and it seemed as though the air would explode. His palm swept out, intending to slap Nethery to death in the void with a single slap. As for the fat dog, the giant opened his mouth, and his eyes were filled with killing intent. His eyes were filled with desire. He would let this fat dog become his nourishment. It was so fat. It would definitely provide him with a rich life force. You slightly furrowed her eyes, and her hair fluttered in the wind. She was holding 3 strands of dog fur in her hand, and when the giant's palm pressed down on her, she gently let out a breath, and the towering peaks on her chest suddenly rose up and down. Then, you ignited the 2 strands of black dog fur that were wrapped around her arms. At this moment, Nethery's power had become extremely formidable and enormous. Boom! The giant's palm suddenly came to a halt. It had been obstructed. You raised one of her hands, using one palm to stop the giant's palm. With a loud boom, the wind howled. The giant's powerful palm was easily blocked by you. After igniting 3 strands of dog fur, you felt that the hidden dragon continent's restriction on her was much weaker. That was why Yu's strength had increased a lot. In the distance, Chu Chongqing looked as though he had seen a ghost when he saw the netherworld ship and the fat dog on it. The Lord Go appeared. Of course, Chu Chongqing knew how strong that black dog was. Wasn't it the black dog that guarded the store? How could it appear here? The Lord Go stood up and the fat on his body shook. A moment later, the Lord Go opened his mouth, letting out a yawn. Then, under everyone's watchful eyes, he walked out of the warship with elegant cat-like steps. It was a dog walking like a cat. When everyone saw it, a strange look appeared on their faces. This mangy dog. Hades' Era held a spicy strip in his hand as he smacked his lips. It was actually roaring. The nether energy soared into the sky, making many people feel a little pressured. That unbelievably beautiful woman had used one palm to stop the berserk giant. It was really miraculous. After the Lord Go finished yawning, his eyeballs slightly turned, and in the end, they fell on the giant. The 3-meter-tall giant looked really huge. After Nethery blocked one of his palms, he raised his other hand and clasped his palms together. He wanted to slap Nethery into minced meat. However, you disappeared in an instant, blocking it. Amethyst Elder's eyes shrank, and the energy on his body instantly burst out. In the next instant, his entire body crossed the void, instantly appearing in front of Hades. He didn't care about other things first. He had to kill this guy who used charcoal to hit his head. That was for his dignity. The terrifying purple energy lingered. Amethyst Elder felt that this puppet's body had reached its limit, and it could no longer bear more of his energy. Boom! A fist blasted out, smashing towards Hades' Era's position. Hades' Era seemed to be stimulated by the strong wind. He turned his head to look, and saw Amethyst Elder rushing towards him. Hades was instantly unhappy. He was about to go and greet that mangy dog. Boom! Amethyst Elder was instantly stunned. His fist, which contained a terrifying amount of energy, actually didn't cause any damage to Hades' Era. Instead, it was blocked by Hades' hand. Waves of energy dissipated, and Era tilted his head, looking at Amethyst Elder with a smile that wasn't a smile. Amethyst Elder was stunned. In the next instant, he felt a wave of pain in his head. That pitch-black and hard object ruthlessly smashed onto Amethyst Elder's face, causing him to be dumbfounded. "You little brat. You actually dare to resist. What are you looking at? I'm going to hit you. Hades smashed another chili strip. He suddenly felt that it was quite easy to hit him. Amethyst Elder was directly smashed onto the ground, and his body exploded. This scene was something that no one had expected. The appearance of a powerful netherworld creature, by Lientian's eyes flashed. She suddenly felt that this matter wasn't simple. Buzz in the void, a dog slowly walked with cat-like step. In a short while, it floated in front of the giant. Lord Go raised his head, calmly looking at the giant. Then, facing the ferocious giant, the dog's mouth cracked open. Woof! The dog's bark was deafening. That sound was like thunder in the sky. In just an instant, the giant was forced back several steps by this dog's bark, landing on his butt. A strong wind blew, and the giant was instantly stunned. Everyone's hearts trembled. In the next instant, Lord Go calmly looked at the giant, slowly raising his dog paw. Chapter 768. It was Hua's first time seeing such a unique fat dog. When the fat on its body shook, one could almost hear the sound of meat colliding with each other. Moreover, as a dog, it actually walked like a cat. Was there something wrong with this dog? Hua's triflower snake eyes spun, glistening. But no matter what, Hua still recognized this dog's power. That dog gave her a sense of urgency, which was an incredible thing. It should be known that Hua was a seven-colored sky-devouring python, an ancient divine beast. Although it was still in its infancy, its inheritance was still there, and its vision was still there. Its strength was still very strong. How could a top-notch divine beast like her be frightened by a dog? Hence, to be able to make her feel pressured, it meant that this dog was definitely not ordinary. Bufang rubbed Hua's head, which made the latter even more confused. Was this dog the lazy dog that Bufang mentioned? Xiaoyu was very happy, cheering on the spot. Although Lord Go looked fierce, Xiaoyu still liked to stay by Lord Go's side. In the Cloud Mist restaurant, Xiaoyu's relationship with Lord Go was also not bad. She would occasionally run to Lord Go's side and secretly pull on Lord Go's fur. Although she did not pull it off, the little girl still felt very happy. Now that she saw Lord Go's fat jiggling, Xiaoyu was very excited. Little Black, you can do it. Slap this big guy who bullies Big Brother to death with one paw. Xiaoyu clenched her fists, straightened her body, and shouted. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. He stretched out his bandaged hand and patted Xiaoyu's head. These two little fellows. Yu's figure floated over and slowly landed beside Bufang. Her slender and fair legs were straight and full of charm. Her face was a little cold. As soon as she landed beside Bufang, Yu narrowed her eyes and looked at Hua. This little girl actually made you feel a sense of danger. Hua tilted his head and looked at Yu. Their gazes collided in the air, sparks flashing. The triflower snake eyes rotated, and a bright light seemed to burst forth. Are you all right? Yu glanced at Hua, then turned her head and looked at Bufang. She asked in a cold tone. Bufang looked calm. He glanced at Yu and nodded. I'm fine. Then, they fell into a brief silence. The two of them did not speak. They raised their heads at the same time to look at Little Black, who was yawning and raising its paw in the void. The giant roared, and the muscles on its body bulged, as if it was squirming. The colorful blood crown under its muscles bulged, and a terrifying energy circulated within it. Chu Changxing's body trembled slightly, and his eyes shrank. This black dog. It was not afraid of the giant's aura. Previously, he thought that this dog was lucky to kill the almighty expert from the heavenly spring Holy Land. Now, it seemed like this black dog was even more unfathomable than he had imagined. He seemed to have underestimated Bufang's power. Rumble! The entire sky was filled with pressure. Energy gathered in the void, and as Little Black raised its paw, waves of energy swirled along with the wind, forming a vortex that slammed down on the giant. The giant's mouth opened wide, and a terrifying look appeared in his eyes. He needed the Taotia's heart. Anyone who obstructed him from obtaining the Taoye's heart had to die. He hated it. He was about to complete the fusion with the Taoye's heart, but halfway through, Bufang appeared. He wanted to absorb Bufang's flesh and life force to complete and awaken the Taoye's heart. He wanted to fuse the Taoye's heart with him, allowing him to achieve immortality. However, he did not expect that the Taoye's heart would be snatched away by that kid. That was why the giant was filled with hatred. He had promised the first valley master of the Valley of Gluttony that he would protect the Taoye's heart, but he could not resist the temptation. He dug out his own heart, wanting to fuse with the Taoye's heart. He caused the Valley of Gluttony to decline day by day, and he almost caused the Valley of Gluttony's inheritance to disappear. He had done so much for his own immortality. Once he succeeded, he would be able to come out and lead the Valley of Gluttony back to the peak of the hidden dragon continent. He had calculated everything perfectly. However, no matter how much he calculated, he failed to calculate that a human would be able to snatch the Taoye's heart from his hands. Furthermore, the human would not be sucked dry by the terrifying suction force of the Taoye's heart. Now, there was a dog in front of him who wanted to stop him from taking back the Taoye's heart. This was unforgivable. Crack, crack. The giant let out a long roar, and his voice pierced through the heavens. The entire palace seemed to tremble at this moment. The muscles on his arms bulged, and then a huge wiggling occurred. In the next moment, a carapace appeared and covered his arms. That arm became extremely thick, and it looked incomparably ferocious. The giant gathered all the life force in his body to form this punch. Although this punch was many times weaker than when he was at his peak, it was already not bad for the giant to be able to do this. This punch, he wanted to kill this arrogant dog in front of him. A mere dog. Crush him into pieces, and turn him into his nourishment. Roar. The giant roared. The aura of the entire space seemed to have been suppressed by a little at this moment. That punch seemed to have caused the void to crumble. Many people were incomparably shocked and their bodies trembled. This punch of the giant already had some of the power of his peak. It had already reached the power of a divine spirit realm expert who had ignited his divine flame. There was almost no one present who could block this attack. Amethyst Elder could not, Bilientian could not, and even Great White could not. Of course Hades, who was holding a pitch-black chili strip in his hand, was not too sure. This person gave Amethyst Elder and the others a feeling that he was unfathomable. At this moment, Bilientian's beautiful face turned cold. In the next instant, she narrowed her eyes and the energy lotus around her started to revolve. Then, it shot towards the Nether King. Hades, who was holding the brick and the chili strip, smashed it down on Amethyst Elder's face. Amethyst Elder's face was filled with despair. This was because Amethyst Elder realized that no matter how hard he tried to block, he could not block this brick. Just when Hades was about to smash Amethyst Elder with the brick, the sound of something breaking through the air rang out. This sound caused the void to tremble. Numerous lotus flowers appeared, surrounding Hades' era. Pink petals floated down. Hades' era was stunned. He raised his hand and a petal landed on his palm. In an instant it melted like ice-cold water. Amethyst Elder, stop playing around. Let's end this battle quickly. Let's take advantage of the fact that this giant has wasted all of his vitality to unleash this punch of a divine spirit realm expert. We have to act quickly and snatch the Taoye's heart before the giant recovers. Bilientian stepped on the lotus as she said solemnly. Amethyst Elder was dumbfounded, and tears streamed down his face. At this moment, he really wanted to shout, "Which of your eyes saw me playing around happily?" This brick was King poisonous. There was no way to dodge it. I'll help you deal with this fellow. We can work together. Don't you need the Taoye's heart? Let's work together and snatch the Taoye's heart. I only need you to promise me a favor. Bilientian's hair fluttered, and the silk that was wrapped around her body also floated up. Her graceful figure was fully displayed. Amethyst Elder's eyes seemed to light up, and his heart was moved. Good! Bang! What's good about it? You brat, you actually want to resist? Just as Amethyst Elder finished saying good, his vision turned black. That smelly brick came smashing down once again, causing him to stumble back a few steps. He fell on his butt in the air, shaking his head. He was incomparably dumbfounded. At this moment, he felt like crying. Impudent! Bai Liantian's eyes narrowed, and her mental energy surged out. In the next instant, the tens of thousands of lotus petals that gently floated down turned into sharp flying knives. Swoosh! 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 Tens of thousands of petals flew toward Bufang at an extremely fast speed. As they rotated, the air seemed to tremble and shatter. A buzzing sound rang out and the petals flew toward Bufang. They completely surrounded Hades. Numerous energy lotuses revolved in the air, releasing countless petals. Bai Liantian's red lips curled up, and a charming smile appeared on her face. Amethyst Elder, you're getting more and more backward. This fellow is so weak, and yet you played with him for so long, Bai Liantian said as she stepped on the lotus. Amethyst Elder patted his swollen head, and he raised his head to look at Bai Liantian. Suddenly, his eyes narrowed, and a strange expression appeared on his face. He opened his mouth, wanting to say something. However, in the end, he didn't say anything. Bai Liantian was very excited. She didn't think that she would succeed so easily. That clown who beat up Amethyst Elder didn't look like much. Could it be that Amethyst Elder's reputation was undeserved? It seemed like she really had to consider whether or not she should cooperate with Amethyst Elder. Everyone was secretly delighted by Bai Liantian's actions. Almost everyone looked at her with a strange expression. Or rather, they looked behind her there. A figure was floating in the air. It was a man, and his hair fluttered in the wind. He held a pitch-black brick in one hand, and his eyes were filled with melancholy. Nether King Erha sighed. Why did youngsters nowadays like to stir up trouble so much? He had no enmity with this woman in the past, and there was no enmity between them. However, this woman actually wanted to kill him. It was really depressing. Youngsters nowadays are so mischievous. Hades Era said calmly. Bai Liantian's body instantly froze, and her entire body was in a mess. She hurriedly turned around and saw the melancholic Hades Era. Erha's eyes were filled with melancholy as he met Bai Liantian's gaze. In the next instant, bang! A brick smashed down. Bai Liantian's scream was heard, everyone's heart skipped a beat. The corner of Amethyst Elder's mouth twitched. In his heart, he felt stifled for Bai Liantian, the palace lord of the wavering light holy land, rumble. In the distance, the giant's palm, which was covered in a dense shell, collided with the fat dog's dainty paw, which was waving in the air like a cat. There was a huge disparity in strength between them. No one could bear to see the black dog's blood splatter on the spot. After all, that was the giant's fist, which was close to the divine spirit realm. Even the void almost collapsed from the impact. No one could block it, let alone a dog. Everyone held their breath. Saint Daughter Ziyun covered her mouth. She couldn't bear to see such a tragic scene. Saint Daughter Ziyun still felt that the chubby black dog was somewhat cute. It would be a pity if it died just like that. A palm and a claw silently collided with each other. At the moment before the collision, the Lord Go opened his mouth and yawned. Tears flowed out of his eyes. He was really tired. Then an explosion occurred. The terrifying scene caused everyone's eyes and pores to shrink. Chapter 769. A huge palm covered in carapace collided with Lord Go's exquisite dog paw. An explosion erupted in an instant. However, everyone's eyes widened as they felt disbelief. That was because the scene before them seemed to be different from what they had imagined. The giant bellowed. Other than his arm, all the vitality in the giant's body seemed to rush into his arm. The carapace seemed to come to life. turning jet black as the patterns on it shone brilliantly. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. Steam rose from the carapace on his arm. That steam was filled with spirit energy, and as he punched, an even more powerful force burst forth. A punch within a punch. This was the giant's punch. It was almost invincible and unstoppable. From everyone's point of view, there was no comparison between a harmless fat dog and this ferocious giant that had punched out a punch that was close to the divine spirit realm. That black dog would definitely be smashed into pieces by this giant's punch. Of course, only a few people who had seen Black's strength would know how strong this fat, harmless dog was. Neither King Ha knew that regarding this mangy dog's strength, no one should be clearer than him. Bufang also knew that his trust in Lord Go was unparalleled. Xiao Ye also trusted him. In her heart, Blackie was invincible. Boom! Lord Go yawned. The dense hot air was filled with spiritual energy and instantly enveloped him. The giant's arm seemed to be emitting rumbling sounds. Boom, boom, boom. Behind Lord Dog, the entire ground trembled, and a strong gust of wind howled. Crushed stones flew everywhere, and a huge fist shadow was blasted out. Such a terrifying punch. Everyone swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Bufang stared at the battle in the void, and his heart trembled slightly. You watched with a serious expression, but there was no trace of worry in her pitch-black eyes. She didn't need to worry about her lord. Hades' era wasn't interested in Black's battle. His current interest was to hold that brick-like spicy strip and teach those youngsters. Crack! A cracking sound rang out. This sound was very abrupt, like the cracking of gravel. Many people shuddered. Raising their heads to look, they saw numerous cracks appearing on the giant's carapace-covered arm. The giant's eyes widened. His skinny face revealed a ferocious expression of disbelief. This fist of his possessed the power to shake mountains. Even a mountain peak would be flattened by this fist of his. But at this moment, the giant's heart was trembling slightly. The white smoke dispersed. Then, the scene that appeared made everyone suck in a breath of cold air as they looked at each other in dismay. Everyone was shocked. The black dog was unscathed. Its black fur was still as clean and tidy as ever, without a speck of dust on it. The mouth of Lord Go curled up into a playful smile as he looked at the giant. The giant's eyes widened as he stared at his shell-covered arm. His arm was densely covered in cracks. The cracks started to spread from his palm and quickly spread to his entire arm. A moment later, the cracks began to spread. The shell began to spin and shatter. Crack! Crack! The giant roared in fear. Every strand of his hair seemed to pierce the illusionary void. The carapace that densely covered his arm rotated and shattered. Very quickly, it turned into densely packed fragments that scattered all over the ground. The giant raised his head. His face was ferocious as he roared. He was frightened, angry, and frightened. The force of the rotation caused his entire arm to be twisted. His eyes were bloodshot. As he coldly looked down, he saw the playful look in the black dog's eyes. That spinning force would strangle him to death. That dog wasn't an ordinary dog. It was definitely a divine spirit realm dog that had ignited its divine flame F***CK, that divine spirit realm dog. The giant was filled with hatred. If he were at his peak, how could he be afraid of that fat dog? At that time, any of his punches would be much more powerful than the one he had just used. That spinning force continued to spread. The shell scattered. His muscles were crushed, and the colorful veins on his body spun. Energy overflowed everywhere. Surprisingly, the other hand caught the hand that had exploded. Then, he opened his mouth and roared. There was a tearing sound. The giant's arm was actually torn off by himself. That scene shocked everyone. Even though his arm was torn off, the spinning force continued. The giant's figure moved sideways with a rumble, and only then did he manage to avoid the invisible whirlwind-like rotating force. Everything quieted down. Nobody dared to breathe loudly. They were bewildered as they looked at that scene. In the air, a fat dog was standing elegantly. It raised one of its paws, which was slightly tilted at a 45-degree angle. Boom! A loud sound echoed. A giant arm fell to the ground. It was broken, and the muscles inside were completely destroyed. Even the bones were broken. The giant panted hard, echoing in the entire area. It was hard for people to breathe. That black dog. How could it be so terrifying? Many experts trembled. Looking at that scene, they didn't know what to say. Emoluji's face was also filled with fear. He leaned against the wall, completely ripping open the clothes in front of his chest. He panted heavily, sweat dripping from his forehead. That black dog. With one paw, it could break a punch that could shake a god? Could it be that this dog was also at the divine spirit realm? Looking at the netherworld ship, which covered the sky and emitted nether energy, Emoluji suddenly felt a dark haze shrouding his mind. He recalled that scene again. That huge eyes that looked like a house, that terrifying existence that stooped down as if it was looking at its food, that was the legendary great netherworld existence. Even the saint sovereigns of the Holy Lands were afraid of it. The chubby and somewhat adorable black dog in front of him actually gave him this kind of feeling of fear. Moreover, that thick nether energy that soared to the sky, this black dog was definitely a netherworld creature. The hidden dragon continent had such an existence. A netherworld creature that could be compared to the divine spirit realm. Was the doomsday of the continent that Granny Mo had mentioned really coming? Emoluji's body shivered slightly. He hammered his chest, trying to calm his breathing. A moment later, he tremblingly raised the star compass in his hand. He glanced at the Lord Go, then at the star compass in his hand. Then, he gritted his teeth. His mental energy surged, as if there were dots of starlight surrounding his body. Swoosh! However, as soon as Emoluji's mental energy started to deduce, he felt as if he was hit by a heavy hammer. His entire face paled, and he spurted a mouthful of black blood. His head felt like it was being pricked by needles. Damn it! Had he touched the taboo existence? Although the heavenly secret Holy Land was said to be able to calculate everything in this world, and the cultivation technique he cultivated could also deduce everything, if the person or the thing he deduced exceeded the limit of his deduction, or even touched the taboo in the legends, he would receive a terrifying backlash. The star compass directly shattered. After flashing for a while, it dimmed and disappeared. Emoluji's entire body slumped to the ground, feeling weak. In the void, the Lord Go's fur slightly moved. Instantly, he turned his head to look around in surprise. He had just realized that someone was peeping at him. However, the power of the person who was peeping at him seemed to be a little weak to dare to peep at him. That person must have a lot of courage. The Lord Go yawned, feeling a little bored, indifferently looking at the panting giant who was kneeling in the distance. He once again stepped forward with his elegant cat-like steps. The void trembled as he strode forward. What's the use of fusing with a trash like the Taotia's heart? Why don't you stir-fry it and eat it? The Lord Go's magnetic voice reverberated in the void. It reverberated in everyone's ears. In the next instant, a strange expression appeared on everyone's face. Bufang was also a little speechless. The corners of his mouth twitched as he looked at the Lord Go in the sky. If the heart is stir-fried, it will become a little old. Actually, it's not bad to use it for stewing. If you add some spirit herbs and stew it, the soup will be very fragrant and nutritious. Bufang rubbed his chin as he said seriously. Everyone's expression became even more strange. Could this man and dog not talk about the cooking of the Taotia's heart in such a serious manner? That was the Taotia's heart, not a pig's heart. That was the Taotia's heart, which could help people break through to the next realm. It could even help an existence at the fake divine spirit realm ignite the divine flame on their divine altar, allowing them to become a sect master. Using the cooking method of a pig's heart to talk about the Taotia's heart, wasn't it too much of a waste? The giant's life force was disappearing rapidly. He was as thin as a stick, and the life energy on his chest had been completely consumed. His eyes revealed a trace of fear in the face of death. "You can't kill me. I was left here by the first Valley Master of the Valley of Gluttony to protect the inheritance. You can't kill me," the giant said fearfully. His voice shook the void, causing it to tremble unceasingly. In the distance, Chu Changxing's face turned pale. Hearing the giant's words, he turned his head and spat. This fellow still had the cheek to say that. If this giant didn't have the selfish heart to fuse with the Taoya's heart, how could the Valley of Gluttony have declined? How could the inheritance of the Valley of Gluttony have been severed for so long? The previous Valley Masters of the Valley of Gluttony were all killed or disappeared by the Saint Sovereigns of the Great Sage. All of this was the giant's fault. He still had the cheek to talk about the first Valley Master of the Valley of Gluttony. Lord Go strode like a cat as he hovered above the giant's head. His clear eyes looked down at the giant, who was shivering in fear. The first Valley Master of the Valley of Gluttony. What kind of toy is that? Lord Go's magnetic voice rang out. The giant's eyes shrank and he opened his mouth to roar. The first Valley Master of the Valley of Gluttony was a peerless expert who shook the hidden dragon continent and suppressed the hidden dragon royal court. He was an invincible existence among the Saint Sovereigns. "Kill me! The Valley Master will never let you go!" The giant widened his eyes and roared, his face ferocious. "The ruler of the divine spirit realm?" Lord Go's nose twitched slightly. In the next instant, the exquisite dog paw lightly waved again, tapping on the giant's forehead. "What Valley Master? What does that have to do with me, Lord Go? If you dare to come, eat one paw of Lord Go. If one paw isn't enough, then 2 paws." Lord Go's magnetic voice echoed. Then, the giant's body stiffened. Boom! With a loud explosion, the giant's body suddenly exploded. Chapter 770. That dog's paw lightly landed on the giant's head. In that instant, the giant's 3-meter-tall body and giant head split open. At the moment of death, the giant's eyes were filled with unwillingness. He was filled with resentment, anger, and he wanted to tear everything apart. To die just like that, he felt extremely wronged. That dog's paw was like the pressure of heaven and earth. The giant wanted to block it, but he didn't have the strength to do so. If he was at his peak, how could he be bullied by a dog like that? His anger surged, and he coughed out blood. However, very quickly, he lost all his thoughts. His entire body was completely shattered by that dog's paw, turning into a pile of debris on the ground. Buzz! An angry howl resounded through the air. A transparent white figure rushed out from the pile of debris on the ground, trying to escape. This was the divine soul of a divine spirit realm expert. Only by igniting the divine flame would one have the chance to reach the divine spirit realm, allowing one's divine soul to solidify and leave one's body. However, once the physical body was destroyed, the divine soul that lost its sustenance would be quickly worn down by the power of heaven and earth. The giant's divine soul would not live for long. Many people looked at the divine soul, and their eyes were filled with complicated emotions. This giant was in existence at the divine spirit realm when he was at his peak, but now he actually died under the paw of a dog. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't sullen. The Lord Go looked at the white divine soul that had turned into a baiguang, which was trying to escape from this world, with an indifferent look in his dog's eyes. The giant's divine soul roared as it sped away. Its speed was extremely fast, and in an instant, it was about to escape from this space. The Lord Go couldn't be bothered with this divine soul. However, just as the giant's divine soul was about to leave, it seemed to be filled with resentment. It actually turned its head and roared at the Lord Go. "You will regret destroying my physical body. The first Valley Master will definitely avenge me." The giant roared, and his face became extremely distorted. His face was filled with malevolence. The hatred on his face had reached its peak. He was filled with hatred. Why did he think of using the Taotia's heart to seduce that kid? If it wasn't for that, he, who possessed the Taotia's heart, would have been able to obtain enough life force to return to this world. At that time, he might be able to suppress the hidden dragon royal court and achieve the same glorious results as the first Valley Master. But now it was too late for regrets. Everything had collapsed like an illusion. All of his preparations had gone to waste. The Lord Go raised his eyes slightly and glanced at the divine soul of the giant that was roaring at him. Letting out a slight yawn, the Lord Go opened his mouth, and his magnetic voice once again burst forth. Originally, I didn't want to destroy your divine soul, but since you want to die, then die. Lord Go said. Everyone was slightly stunned. In the next instant, everyone's pupils shrunk as a chill instantly enveloped their bodies. Woof! The black dog in the void suddenly opened its mouth wide, its sharp teeth shining brightly under the light. Woof! A dog's bark rang out. In the next instant, the sound waves rolled out, bringing with them a surging gale. In the sky, the face of the divine soul of the giant contorted instantly. He was incomparably frightened. He turned around and wanted to escape. However, very quickly, he realized that the dog's bark had shaken his body, causing his divine soul to be completely fixed in the void. He couldn't move at all. That huge dog's mouth covered the sky as it approached. Then, under the terrified gaze of the giant, his divine soul was just swallowed by that huge dog's mouth. The dog's mouth became smaller, but it quickly regained its calmness. The Lord Go's mouth twitched as if he was disgusted. It's been a long time since I've eaten a divine soul. It's a little disgusting. Sweet and sour ribs is still the best, the Lord Go muttered. Thump, thump, many people's legs were a little weak, and they directly fell on their butt. Their faces were a little cold. That dog was simply a monster. How could it even eat divine souls? It was a divine soul. It was an existence that represented the divine spirit realm. When one cultivated to the pinnacle, one would have a 9-step soul ladder, and condense the divine altar. Only then would one have a chance to ignite the divine flame. How much effort would one have to put in to reach such a realm? However, it couldn't even withstand a single bite from that black dog. That dog was simply an existence that made people feel like they were living in a nightmare. Emolyogi's pupils shrank, and he panted heavily. His body trembled uncontrollably, and his entire body was drenched in sweat. Chu Chongqing and the others looked at the dog in the void with complicated and fearful eyes. Hades' era naturally wasn't surprised by this scene. With the Lord Go's claws, not to mention one giant, even if there were 10 of them, they would still be like chickens and dogs. As Hades thought about this, he swung the pitch-black brick-like spicy strip in his hand once again. It drew a beautiful arc in the air, and it smashed into Bailientian, who had just struggled to get up from the lotus. Bailientian went crazy. Her beautiful figure disappeared, and all that was left was a shrew's cursing. She was so angry. A woman's appearance was the most important thing, but this fellow in front of her actually used that dirty charcoal-like thing to hit her face. More importantly, she couldn't even dodge it. Why was her life so tragic? Bailientian screamed, and she was about to go crazy. Great White, who was watching from afar, felt his heart tremble. He touched his fair face, then revealed his sawtooth-like teeth, and smiled happily. Fortunately, he didn't provoke that brick-carrying fellow. One look at that fellow, and he knew that he wasn't ordinary. Even though he was carrying a brick, he still looked so majestic. It was better for him to follow his shrimp ancestor. If he hugged the shrimp ancestor's thigh tightly, he would be able to occupy a place in the endless sea. This time, if he hadn't angered the Black Dragon King, he wouldn't have escaped from the Black Dragon Palace and come to the Hidden Dragon Continent. Moreover, for an inheritance and a chance, he even took the risk to enter the royal court's holy land. Moreover, it was the Valley of Gluttony, and he risked becoming an ingredient of the Valley of Gluttony to snatch a chance. However, he encountered an even better chance, and that was the shrimp ancestor. Although the Taotai was an ancient divine beast, it wasn't a sea divine beast. Hence, it didn't affect Great White much. If he had to choose between the Taotia's heart and the shrimp ancestor, Great White would definitely choose the shrimp ancestor. After all, they were from the endless sea. When a fellow villager met a fellow villager, his eyes were filled with tears. Hence, he made the wise decision to hug the shrimp ancestor's thigh tightly. Xiao Bai's gray eyes flickered, and he looked at Great White suspiciously. Great White opened his sawtooth-like mouth and smiled warmly. Great White tried his best to radiate kindness, but without saying a word, Xiao Bai waved the war god's stick over. That fellow's smile was so ugly, and one look and one could tell that he wasn't a good person. Bai Liantian fled. She couldn't bear this kind of grievance anymore. Lying on top of the dark green lotus, she swayed as she escaped. Amethyst Elder's eyes twinkled, and hot air exhaled from his nostrils. He glanced at the Nether King, who was holding the brick, and then at the black dog, who was strutting its cat-like steps in the air. The corners of his mouth twitched. His figure turned, and he directly tore open the void as he fled. Two powerful netherworld creatures. Amethyst Elder was very clear that this clone of his might not even be able to defeat the broken giant, let alone the black dog that had smashed the giant apart with a single swipe of its paw. Hence, he chose to escape. It wasn't easy to refine a powerful clone, and Amethyst Elder didn't want to waste it here. Before he left, he stepped into the void. Amethyst Elder's hair fluttered as he turned his head to look at Saint Daughter Ziyun. "You little girl, hurry up and leave with me," Amethyst Elder said with incomparable majesty. Saint Daughter Ziyun froze, then she snorted and turned her head, no longer looking at Amethyst Elder. Amethyst Elder's face darkened, and his heart was filled with anger. This disobedient little girl, all of a sudden, his eyes widened. That was because the hooligan with the brick had suddenly landed beside his daughter. He reached out his hand and patted his daughter's shoulder, talking and laughing. Damn! That hooligan used a brick to hit his face, and he still wanted to flirt with his daughter? This damned thing! Amethyst Elder was enraged. One of his feet had already stepped into the void, and he hated that he couldn't rush out and fight 100 rounds with that hooligan with the brick. However, he remembered that this was just a clone, and it wasn't his real body. He couldn't defeat that hooligan, so he could only use his sharp eyes to warn Hades' era. Buzz, the void closed, and soon it disappeared. "You little kid, don't be afraid. That fellow's face is swollen, so he doesn't dare to be mean to you. I said I would bring you to eat Owner Boo's delicious spicy strips, but you haven't tasted it yet," Hades said seriously. Saint Daughter Ziyun's face was red. She covered her mouth, lying on the ground and laughing. Big Brother Era was such a good person. The fight for the inheritance seemed to have come to an end just like that. Amethyst Elder ran away, and so did Palace Master Bai of the Wavering Light Holy Land. Great White changed sides and hugged the thigh of a shrimp. The giant who planned everything was also smashed into pieces by a dog's paw. The inheritance seemed to have been obtained, and the Taotia's heart also had an owner. Everything was over. Some experts weren't willing to give up. Their eyes sparkled as they stared at Bufang, wanting to fight for the Taotia's heart. However, when they saw the fat dog stride across the sky and land on the netherworld ship, everyone's hearts trembled. Their original covetous gazes also disappeared. That dog was truly a ruthless dog. Hence, many experts retreated. Their eyes twinkled as they quickly left the land of inheritance, which had almost turned into ruins. They were sure that they wouldn't be able to find anything good in these ruins. He was very touched. After so many years, the Valley of Gluttony's inheritance had finally returned. This meant that the Valley of Gluttony was going to rise again. The experts from the other Holy Lands, who were originally planted in the Valley of Gluttony, also fled this time, not staying to guard the Valley of Gluttony. Because there was no longer any meaning. The Valley of Gluttony's inheritance had been inherited, and the Taotia's heart, which they originally wanted to fight for, was guarded by a terrifying black dog. They had no chance at all. Hence, they had to hurry back and report the news truthfully. The news that a powerful netherworld creature had appeared in the Valley of Gluttony shocked them even more. Bufang and the others walked down. The vermilion robe on Bufang's body emitted a dazzling radiance, and he looked as though he was taking a leisurely stroll in the park. He was very calm. Although the process this time was very dangerous, and he had almost been fused with the Taoya's heart, in the end, he had survived. Just as he had said, he didn't need to fuse with the Taoya's heart. He needed to use his own strength to continuously grow, to become the god of cooking, and to defy the heavens. Chu Changxing's face trembled as he looked at Xiaoya, who was slowly walking down. Looking at the inheritance memory crystal in her glabella, his body trembled violently. He was moved. Xiaoya was the future of the Valley of Gluttony. She was the guarantee to lead the Valley of Gluttony to shake the hidden dragon royal court. From today onwards, Xiaoya was the new Valley Master of the Valley of Gluttony. This old man, Chu Changxing, greets the Valley Master. Chu Changxing's old tears streamed down his face. When he saw Xiaoya, he immediately bowed. The moment Chu Changxing bowed, the solemn voice of the system resounded in Bufang's head. Chapter 771. Chu Changxing was so excited that he didn't know what to say. Looking at Xiaoya and the inheritance memory crystal on Xiaoya's forehead, tears streamed down his face, and his entire body trembled. It was because he was excited, because he had found hope again. Chu Changxing was tired, but he didn't give up. He had been looking for a chance for the Valley of Gluttony to rise again. He believed that one day, the Valley of Gluttony could rule the entire hidden dragon royal court and suppress the other holy land. However, it had been so difficult that it had almost crushed his old body. If he didn't believe in hope, he would have given up already. Facing those powerful holy lands of the royal court, the Valley of Gluttony was too weak. Xiaoya had obtained the precious inheritance of the Valley of Gluttony. Without a doubt, this little girl was the current Valley Master of the Valley of Gluttony. The previous Valley Master of the Valley of Gluttony, who was also Xiaoya's father, had been missing for a long time. Chu Changxing couldn't be found, and the Valley of Gluttony didn't have a master. Today, he found Xiaoya, and she had received the inheritance. Xiaoya would become the new Valley Master, and everyone would be happy. Chu Changxing's eyes were filled with love for Xiaoya. Then, his eyes shifted, falling on Bufang, who was rubbing Xiaoya's head. This time, the inheritance could be completed smoothly because of Bufang. If it weren't for Bufang, perhaps the Valley of Gluttony wouldn't have anything to do with the inheritance this time. Whether it was the man with the brick, the Lord Go, or Xiao Bai, these people or dogs, they all had a close relationship with Bufang. Without these people, the Valley of Gluttony wouldn't have any power to compete. Perhaps they could only watch the inheritance fall into the hands of those thieves. Thus, Chu Changxing was grateful to Bufang. Bufang was a chef, and his cooking skills were excellent. Thus, Chu Changxing suddenly had an idea. If he could keep Bufang in the Valley of Gluttony, it would be a good thing for the Valley of Gluttony. Thus, Chu Changxing's eyes sparkled. He looked at Bufang as if he was looking at a peerless precious jade. Owner Bu, thank you for helping my Valley of Gluttony solve the crisis. I don't know how to thank you, said Chu Changxing to Bufang. However, Bufang's eyes were a little unfocused. He didn't seem to hear Chu Changxing's words. At this moment, Bufang didn't have time to listen to what Chu Changxing had to say. The system's serious voice resounded in his mind. Please complete the chef's challenge against the top 10 chefs of the Tablet of Gluttony as soon as possible and build a branch in the Valley of Gluttony within a month. Host, please initiate the Divine Soul Realm Advancement test within 3 days. The system's voice resounded in Bufang's mind, causing his brows to involuntarily furrow. Bufang came back to his senses. It turned out that he hadn't completed the mission yet. It turned out that he had been busy for half a day, but it was all for naught. It seemed that he had to seize the time to finish the rest of the chef's challenge. Moreover, the advancement test had to be completed within 3 days. All of a sudden, Bufang felt that he was pressed for time. Chu Chongqing felt a little embarrassed. Bufang didn't seem to hear him at all. A gust of wind blew past, and it felt as cold as a stone statue. Fortunately, Bufang's eyes moved, and his mind returned to his body. He looked at Chu Chongqing and asked suspiciously, "What did you just say?" "I want to thank you, but I don't know how to do it. I wonder if Owner Bu is willing to stay in the Valley of Gluttony?" asked Chu Chongqing. Stay in the Valley of Gluttony? Bufang was a little surprised. The system's mission seemed to ask him to build a branch in the Valley of Gluttony. Of course, he wanted to stay in the Valley of Gluttony. Hence, Bufang seriously looked into Chu Chongqing's eyes and nodded solemnly. "I want to stay." Chu Chongqing received Bufang's affirmation, and his eyes instantly shot out a dazzling light. He was very excited. If Bufang was willing to stay, it would be a great thing for the Valley of Gluttony. Good. The Valley of Gluttony has many things to do, but I can make the decision to give Owner Bu an elder position. Chu Chongqing clenched his fists, extremely excited. An elder position? Bufang was bewildered. He didn't seem to understand what Chu Chongqing meant. He just wanted to stay in the Valley of Gluttony and build a branch. Why did he want to be an elder? Was Chu Chongqing stupid? Moreover, what was the point of being an elder? He just wanted to open his shop in peace. What elder? I won't do it. Bufang shook his head, directly refusing. Chu Chongqing was bewildered. Why didn't Bufang want to be an elder? If he chose to stay in the Valley of Gluttony, wouldn't it be good to give him an elder position? He could even have many privileges. Chu Chongqing opened his mouth, wanting to say something. However, Bufang directly interrupted him. "Oh right, my chef's challenge hasn't ended yet. I need to continue the chef's challenge and defeat the rest of them," Bufang said seriously, looking at Chu Chongqing. In the distance, the people around Chu Chongqing stiffened. Wenren Shang gulped down a mouthful of wine, looking at Bufang awkwardly. This fellow still didn't know when to stop. It was such a serious situation, and he was still thinking about the chef's challenge. Mu Cheng and Lu Jelly also looked at Bufang, a little puzzled. "All right, I don't want to say anything. Tomorrow, the rest of you can come together and directly end the chef's challenge." Bufang rubbed his chin, directly making his decision. Many people took in a breath of cold air when they heard Bufang's decision. What did he mean by "the rest of you can come together"? Was Bufang going to challenge 6 chefs by himself again? And the other 3 were special grade chefs? This was too arrogant. Each special grade chef's cooking skills were unimaginably strong. It was really difficult for one person to finish cooking under the pressure of 3 special grade chefs, let alone competing with them on the same stage. Chu Chongqing frowned, saying, "I'm afraid it's not possible. The Valley of Gluttony has many things to do. If Owner Bu wants to have a chef's challenge, he should come one by one. We can't use the Gluttony Square for a while. Owner Bu will come directly for a chef's challenge. The chef's challenge can be carried out face to face. Anyway, I have to remind Owner Bu not to underestimate the top 10 chefs of the Tablet of Gluttony. Each of them has their own unique skills. Especially the top 3 special grade chefs of the Tablet of Gluttony," Chu Chongqing said. Then, he remembered Yen Yu, the traitor who deserved 1,000 cuts. Yen Yu was a member of the ancient Jade Holy Land, which had kept him in the dark for a long time. It was lucky that he didn't get the inheritance. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. Come one by one for a chef's challenge? It sounds very exciting. Bufang narrowed his eyes. Eventually, the corners of his mouth rose and he nodded. "All right." Chu Chongqing was bewildered. Did Bufang really want to do it? After Bufang said that, he continued to walk forward. His palm gently patted Chu Changxing's shoulder, then he strode forward with big steps. Nethery, on the other hand, strode her long legs and followed at his side. Xiaoya and Hua held hands, following Bufang. The Lord Go was sleeping soundly in the Netherworld ship. You had retrieved the Netherworld ship, so in the end, the Lord Go just lay on the ground, sleeping soundly. Hades' Era came back with a face full of smiles. He moved closer to Bufang's ear, wanting to ask for a spicy strip. This time, Hades had helped him a lot, so Bufang wasn't stingy at all. He gave the last spicy strip to Hades' Era. The last remaining one. Hades' Era looked at Bufang with tears in his eyes. He wanted to ask for more spicy strips, but Bufang spread his hands, indicating that he didn't have any left. Saint Daughter Ziyun, who was by Hades' side, looked at the spicy strip in Hades' hand. Was this the legendary spicy strip that Brother Ha had mentioned? It looked different from the one that Brother Ha had made. It smelled so good and it smelled so delicious. Just by smelling the spicy strip, Saint Daughter Ziyun realized that she was drooling. Hades' Era pinched the spicy strip, sighing. He turned his head to look at Saint Daughter Ziyun with a gloomy face. Young man, it's not that I don't want to help you, but the spicy strips are limited. I am the kind of person who will die if I don't have spicy strips. You should understand right? Nether King Ha's gloomy eyes looked at Saint Daughter Ziyun. Saint Daughter Ziyun blushed, and she couldn't help but lower her head. Brother Ha, you're bad. Don't stare at me like that. Saint Daughter Ziyun raised her hand shyly, patting Hades' Era's arm. That tone of voice caused goosebumps to rise all over the Nether King's body. That slap almost caused the Nether King to drop his spicy strip. Damn. Young people nowadays are so mischievous? Then, I will take it that you agreed. I will bring you to eat spicy strips next time, said Era. After he finished speaking, he happily pinched the chili strip and moved his nose close to it. He took a deep breath. A moment later, the spicy strip entered his mouth, moving in and out continuously. The feeling of the spicy strip rubbing against his lips caused the Nether King to narrow his eyes involuntarily. The days when I have spicy strips, I feel as though I have been reborn. So happy. He ignored Hades' Era's funny eating manners. Everybody decided to leave the road of gluttony. In the distance, Emolyoji clutched his chest. Blood trickled down the corner of his mouth as he gazed at the black dog sleeping on the ground. He took a deep breath. He turned to look at Bufang, narrowing his eyes. This fellow. Is he the capable Saint Daughter's inner demon? Everything that the astrolabe had told him pointed to this young man. This young man seemed to have obtained the Taotia's heart. He could talk and laugh with so many netherworld creatures. This young man wasn't ordinary. No wonder he could become the capable Saint Daughter's inner demon. He wasn't ordinary at all. However, since he had provoked so many netherworld creatures, one day, this young man would have to pay the price. The Hidden Dragon Royal Court and the experts of the Endless Sea would not allow any netherworld creature above the Great Void Realm to appear on the Hidden Dragon continent. Moreover, there were so many of them here. Not to mention the taboo dog, the icy beauty with long, black hair. Her aura was not something an ordinary great ethereal realm expert could have. Also, the Nether King, who was walking in and out of the room while eating spicy strips, seemed to be an extraordinary existence from the netherworld. Hiss. Thinking about this, Emolyoji felt a chill run down his spine. He gazed at Bufang. Granny Mo's words about bringing the capable Saintess inner demon back were thrown to the back of his head. This fellow could only be gentle. He couldn't be violent. He didn't want to be slapped to death by that dog's paw. Yenyu was annoyed. He slowly got up from the ground, following the crowd to leave. He felt that he had to leave. Otherwise, he would die here. When Chu Changxing and the others came back to their senses, he wouldn't be able to leave. It wasn't because he was a traitor. He had betrayed the Valley of Gluttony. All of a sudden, Yen Yu's body stiffened. That was because he discovered that a fair and slender palm had appeared on his shoulder. The appearance of that palm caused his entire body to jump. Turning his head, he saw an emotionless face. "Don't hurry to leave. You're the first chef on the tablet of gluttony, right?" Bufang looked at Yen Yu seriously. Yen Yu was bewildered. The corners of Bufang's mouth rose and his eyes narrowed. "Good. You're the one. Let's have a chef's challenge." Chapter 772. Let's have a chef's challenge. When Bufang's palm landed on Yen Yu's shoulder, Yen Yu was so scared that his heart almost jumped out of his chest. He was really frightened by that gloomy man. The feeling of his fists hitting his flesh made his entire body shiver. Now that he thought about it, he still shivered. Thinking about how he, the #1 chef of the Tablet of Gluttony, was beaten so badly that he had to shiver in fear. Thinking about it, he shivered. It was really shameful. However, when he turned his head and saw Bufang's expressionless face, Yen Yu let out a long sigh of relief. At this moment, Yen Yu suddenly felt that Bufang's arrogant face was really cute. At least, it was much cuter than that gloomy face. Yen Yu's eyes glanced around and saw Hades, who was grabbing a spicy strip and putting it in and out of his mouth. That fellow's vulgar movements made him curse inwardly. Chu Changxing's gaze made him shiver. Thinking about how he had used the ancient jade lock to lock Chu Changxing, he knew that Chu Changxing would not let him go. He wanted to run, but it seemed like he couldn't. "Have a chef's challenge with me," said Bufang. Yen Yu was being stared at by everyone, and sweat trickled down his forehead. Today, everyone knew that Yen Yu was a traitor who had betrayed the Valley of Gluttony. Thus, they didn't have a good face for him. As for Yen Yu, many people snorted disdainfully. Before this, they didn't really believe that Yen Yu was the #1 chef of the Tablet of Gluttony. That was because the chefs on the Tablet of Gluttony had their own specialties. Compared to first-grade chefs, a special-grade chef could only defeat a few more people. In the Valley of Gluttony, to become a special-grade chef, one had to get on the Tablet of Gluttony. Then, one had to be in the top 10 of the Tablet of Gluttony and defeat every first-grade chef. Yen Yu's culinary skills weren't bad, and he had defeated many people. His defeat wasn't like Bufang, who had climbed all the way to the top in a chef's challenge. It was just a normal competition. Some people, like Wenren Shang and the others, would never seriously compete in cooking skills. Mu Cheng and the others did not have any desire for first place. During the competition, they did not bring out their specialties. Hence, losing to Yen Yu was very normal. Yen Yu rolled his eyes, looking around. Finally, his gaze returned to Bufang and said, "Why should I have a chef's challenge with you?" He was about to lose his life, so how could he still have the mood to have a chef's challenge? What he cared about now was how Chu Changxing would deal with him. He didn't know how Chu Changxing would deal with him. Chu Changxing's eyes were cold. He clasped his hands behind his back and looked at Yen Yu indifferently. That kid had dared to use the ancient jade lock to lock him. The numbness he felt when the lightning struck his body made him furious. He was Chu Changxing, the great elder of the Valley of Gluttony. He was also an almighty expert. As a powerhouse, he had the pride of a powerhouse. He couldn't bear being humiliated by someone who was much weaker than him. He took a step forward. Chu Changxing's figure appeared by Yen Yu's side, giving off an oppressive aura. Yen Yu's eyes shrank. Without saying a word, he turned around and left. His face was filled with fear. However, how could he be Chu Changxing's opponent? How could he escape from Chu Changxing's hands? Chu Changxing's big hand grabbed, and thousands of energy gathered. Like a shackle, it slammed Yen Yu's entire body onto the ground. Yen Yu's body hit the ground with a bang. The ground caved in and cracks appeared. Yen Yu coughed out blood, his eyes filled with fear. He loudly begged for mercy. He didn't want to die. Chu Changxing's eyes were cold. Suddenly, he looked at Bufang, his eyes slightly narrowing. Then, the corners of his mouth rose. Don't you want to live? Sure. As long as you have a chef's challenge with Ownerbu, if you win, I will let you return to the ancient Jade Holy Land. If you lose, then you can die, Chu Chongqing said. His words were cold. His words were incomparably cold, but when they landed in Yen Yu's ears, it was like a life-saving straw. I will have a chef's challenge with him. Yen Yu's eyes were filled with excitement. He didn't think that Chu Chongqing would be so arrogant. Chu Chongqing should know his ability. He was a genuine special grade chef. He also knew Bufang's cooking level. Although he had won a few chef's challenges, he didn't care about it. He was confident because he was number 1 on the tablet of gluttony. He crawled up from the ground and crushed stones fell. Yen Yu's eyes revealed a trace of wild joy. I will have a chef's challenge with you, Yen Yu said with a fanatical tone. Bufang looked at Yen Yu indifferently. The vermilion robe on his body fluttered in the wind. All right. Tomorrow morning, we will have a chef's challenge. The location will be the Noodle King restaurant, Bufang said. In the distance, Ouyang Chunfeng was slightly stunned. In the next moment, his eyes revealed a trace of gratitude. Ouyang Chunfeng didn't think that Bufang's chef's challenge would be held in the Noodle King restaurant. Originally, the Noodle King restaurant's business would definitely decline because of Ouyang Chunfeng's chef's challenge. If the chef's challenge between Bufang and Yen Yu could be held in the Noodle King restaurant, it would be a huge boost to the restaurant's popularity. It should be known that although Yen Yu's cooking skills weren't that great, there was no doubt about his identity and popularity. He was the true number 1 on the tablet of gluttony. This gimmick was enough to attract a lot of people. At that time, his popularity would explode. All right, I will go and prepare immediately. Prepare for tomorrow's chef's challenge, Ouyang Chunfeng said. Tomorrow's chef's challenge, prepare your own ingredients. The theme is dumplings. Yen Yu's eyes slightly narrowed as he looked at Bufang. Dumplings? Prepare your own ingredients? Yen Yu's request made Bufang slightly stunned. He didn't think that Yen Yu would make such a request. Bufang naturally knew about dumplings. He used to cook rainbow-colored crescent moon dumplings. However, if he used rainbow-colored crescent moon dumplings for the chef's challenge tomorrow, Bufang felt that it might not be a good choice. Bufang also furrowed his brows. Didn't Yen Yu know that he had taotai meat on him? If he used taotai meat, what chance would Yen Yu have to win? Just based on ingredients alone, Bufang had thrown Yen Yu 10 streets away. There was no suspense at all. Of course, you can't use taotai meat. Yen Yu looked at Bufang, his mouth cracking into a cold smile. Yen Yu wasn't stupid. He didn't want Bufang to use ingredients at the peak of the divine soul realm. Not to mention him, even if he searched the entire Valley of Gluttony's storehouse, he wouldn't be able to find such ingredients. Indeed, Bufang's heart wasn't that surprised. He nodded, then clasped his hands and left. Prepare well. I hope you won't disappoint me. If there's no challenge, it'll be boring. At this moment, Yen Yu was also fearless. Looking at Bufang's back as he left, he opened his mouth. He seemed to have recovered his high-spirited spirit when he was the number 1 chef of the tablet of gluttony. Chu Chongqing's face gave a cold smile. He glanced at him, then ignored him. Everyone left the road of gluttony. When they returned to the Valley of Gluttony, the battle outside had reached its climax. The experts of the Holy Lands had almost retreated. Although the entire Valley of Gluttony was in a mess, at least they had protected it. It didn't fall into the hands of the hidden dragon royal court. As long as the foundation was there would be a day when they could rise again. As soon as Chu Chongqing saw the Valley of Gluttony in a mess, he hurried to bring his people to repair the Valley of Gluttony. The others also left one after another. Ouyang Chunfeng left hurriedly. He wanted to return to his Noodle King restaurant to prepare for the chef's challenge tomorrow. Mu Cheng and the others were also looking forward to the chef's challenge tomorrow. Yen Yu walked out of the road of gluttony, disappearing shortly. He seemed to be too ashamed to meet people. Bu Fang, on the other hand, calmly brought Yu and the others to his residence. In the sky, 2 bright moons hung, emitting cold radiance. Hua stuck to Xiaoya, while Chu Chongxing found a room for the 2 of them to stay in. Xiaoya was now the valley master of the Valley of Gluttony. She was very noble, and Chu Chongxing treated her like a fragile porcelain doll. Bu Fang and the others stayed in the inn. Lord Go was sleeping soundly in Bu Fang's room. Hades' era was also thinking about the spicy strip he had eaten. Saint Daughter Zi Yun leaned against the window, her voluptuous body swaying slightly. She lifted her head to look at the bright moon in the sky, her eyes rippling like water. This night the city was brightly lit. Many people couldn't sleep at all. At the same time, the Valley of Gluttony was in full swing of its restoration. In the kitchen of the inn, Bu Fang clasped his hands, slowly pacing. He was thinking about what dish he should cook for the chef's challenge tomorrow. The theme was dumplings. It could be boiled dumplings, steamed dumplings, fried dumplings, deep-fried dumplings, and so on. No matter what, Bu Fang had to choose a direction. At the same time, he was thinking about the ingredient. His opponent the next day was Yen Yu, the first chef on the tablet of gluttony. It wouldn't be easy, so Bu Fang didn't dare to be careless. As a special grade chef, Yen Yu had a famous knife from the Valley of Gluttony, the shadow chopping knife. This knife was a divine weapon, and it greatly enhanced the taste of the ingredients it cut. Although it was called the shadow chopping knife, its speed was so fast that it could almost cut shadows. It had some special effects. However, compared to a kitchen knife, Bu Fang wasn't afraid. Green smoke twirled around his hand. The ancient, pitch-black dragon bone kitchen knife appeared in his hand. Although it was pitch-black, as long as Bu Fang filled it with true energy, it would turn into a golden dragon bone kitchen knife. The tool spirit, the golden dragon, would also let out a dragon roar. Because of the inheritance this time, the tool spirit had swallowed many tool spirits of famous knives, so its relationship with Bu Fang had improved a lot. Although the dragon bone kitchen knife's tool spirit was still not a bird, if Bu Fang took the initiative to ask, the golden dragon would at least answer. It was a small step, but it was a big step in the future. Bu Fang believed that one day, he would be able to subdue all the tool spirits of the god of cooking set. At that time, his cooking skills would reach a level that he couldn't even imagine. Of course, the main goal now was to prepare for tomorrow's chef's challenge. Tomorrow's chef's challenge wouldn't be simple, but Bu Fang didn't feel any pressure. He clasped his hands, pacing back and forth. Bu Fang's eyes suddenly flashed. He turned his head to look at Xiao Bai, who was standing at the door scratching his round head, and at Xiaopi, who was sleeping soundly on Xiao Bai's head. Xiaopi Bu Fang blinked, then the corners of his mouth rose. Tomorrow's chef's challenge depends on you. Golden Mantis Shrimp. Chapter 773. Bu Fang's gaze was extremely sharp. Turning his head, he saw Xiao Bai, who was spitting bubbles on Xiaopi's head. Xiaopi was a golden shrimpy, and its effects were not ordinary. If it was used properly, it would be of great help to the improvement of the taste of the dish. The bubbles that Xiaopi was spitting suddenly exploded, and its rolling eyes instantly opened. It scanned the surroundings suspiciously. Xiao Bai also scratched his round head, as though he was a little suspicious of Bu Fang's gaze. Bu Fang clasped his hands behind his back, and the corners of his mouth rose slightly. He was in a good mood. Then, he ignored Xiao Bai and Xiaopi's suspicious gazes and began his cooking practice. Heavenly Spring Holy Landin, a dusty secret chamber, Amethyst Elder slowly opened his eyes, and a trace of unwillingness appeared in his eyes. Dense spirit energy spurted out from his nostrils like a dragon. That long dragon danced ferociously, but it quickly disappeared into the air. Amethyst Elder opened his mouth, and turbid energy spread out. His body seemed to be enveloped in a layer of fog, causing his figure to be slightly blurry. A terrifying energy spread out. Damn it! I actually failed. I still haven't obtained the Valley of Gluttony's inheritance. I still haven't obtained the Taotia's heart. Amethyst Elder was a little angry. As of now, he had already reached the critical moment of breaking through, and he did not have any extra energy to snatch back the Taotia's heart. Originally, he had sent his clone over to snatch back the Taotia's heart. Then, he would immediately retrieve it and help him break through his current shackles. Unfortunately, all of his wishful thinking had crumbled. Since that's the case, I can only forcefully break through. However, once I finish breaking through, everyone who obstructs me will die. A purple flame appeared in Amethyst Elder's eyes. Then, the secret chamber once again fell into silence. Yen Yu returned to his residence. He gritted his teeth, and his eyes were filled with indignation. Why did the Valley of Gluttony's inheritance belong to that little girl? He was clearly the Valley of Gluttony's #1 chef on the Tablet of Gluttony. He was the most suitable person to obtain the inheritance. Yen Yu clenched his fist and ruthlessly smashed it against the wall, causing it to crumble. Then, he took a deep breath to calm himself down. He knew that now wasn't the time to complain. Tomorrow was the chef's challenge, and that was the most important thing. His identity had been exposed, but Chu Chongqing had spared his life to prepare for tomorrow's chef's challenge. Although Yen Yu was furious with Chu Chongqing, he had to admit that Chu Chongqing was a man of his word, since he had agreed to the chef's challenge tomorrow. As long as he, Yen Yu, won, he would let him leave the Valley of Gluttony safely. He would definitely not go back on his words. What he needed to do now was to ensure his victory tomorrow. Yen Yu's eyes flickered and his hair hung down, covering half of his face. It made him look extremely sinister. Then, he walked to a corner of the room. This place was built after so many years in the Valley of Gluttony. There were many secret rooms inside, and these secret rooms were where he stored his precious ingredient. Once the secret room was opened, an icy cold air blew out. That cold air was bone-chilling, and it spread to people's bodies, causing them to involuntarily shiver. Yen Yu stepped into the secret room. He gently exhaled, and the air that he exhaled turned into ice beads, falling to the ground and emitting the sound of small and large pearls falling onto a jade plate. Yen Yu's hand shook, and a ball of flame flew into his hand. The flame instantly lit up the entire secret room. This secret room was actually filled with piles of ice. These ice cubes emitted a cold air, and it was extremely cold. When the light from the flame shone on the ice cubes, it was as if it was being reflected by a crystal, reflecting all kinds of dazzling splendor. Yen Yu's face was filled with enjoyment as he looked at this scene. The corners of his mouth curled up, revealing an intoxicated smile. This place was filled with his treasures. The ingredients that he had collected for a long time were all hidden here. Portions of ingredients were sealed within these ice cubes. A kitchen knife appeared in Yen Yu's hand. That kitchen knife seemed to have two colors. One side was emitting a knife light, and the other side was incomparably black, as if it could even absorb light. This was the famous knife that Yen Yu had, the shadow-chopping knife. Holding the knife with one hand, he fiercely stabbed into the ice cubes, and a gap was instantly cut open in the bright ice wall. True energy surged into the shadow-chopping knife, and in the next instant, he suddenly exerted force. The cracks on the ice wall became more and more concentrated, and soon, it was densely packed. A ripping sound rang out. The shadow-chopping knife cut open a wide gap on the ice wall. Yen Yu's eyes were burning with passion as he stepped into the ice wall. A white lotus that looked as if it was made of ice floated within the ice cave. Cold air spread out, and specks of cold light lingered around the white lotus after collecting for so many years. This is the only 8-petal snow lotus I've collected. With this as an ingredient, I don't believe that little chef can defeat me. Looking at the 8-petal snow lotus slowly lingering in the cold air, Yen Yu's eyes instantly revealed a burning passion and excitement, as well as an indescribable confidence. In tomorrow's chef's challenge, he would definitely win. The next day, the weather was clear and sunny. The sun was bright and resplendent, sprinkling down from the sky and covering the ground. It was somewhat gentle and somewhat comfortable. The Valley of Gluttony was still busy. Everyone was working together to restore the Valley of Gluttony. However, other than restoring the Valley of Gluttony, there was another big event that was going to happen today. That was, the original Chef's Challenge had not ended, and it was still ongoing. The location of today's Chef's Challenge was actually the Noodle King restaurant, which was opened by the defeated Noodle King, Ouyang Chinfeng. Many people arrived at the Noodle King restaurant early in the morning, preparing to reserve a good spot. On the second floor of the Noodle King restaurant, there were already 2 stoves set up. These stoves were made of bronze, and they were extremely luxurious. There were many exquisite carvings on them. Obviously, for this chef's challenge, Noodle King Ouyang Chinfeng had made sufficient preparations. He actually took out such an exquisite stove. However, it was normal for him to take it out. After all, the 2 parties in this chef's challenge were not ordinary people. One was the Valley of Gluttony's tablet of Gluttony's first rank. Whether or not it was fake, this rank was the real deal. The other was the young chef, Bufang, who had never lost a chef's challenge until now. Today, in the Valley of Gluttony, almost everyone knew the young chef, Bufang. His achievements had become the topic of many people's leisure time. With his own power, he had fought against 3 chefs on the tablet of Gluttony's tablet of Gluttony, and the most important thing was that he had won the chef's challenge. After taking away the kitchen knives of the 3 chefs, the 3 chefs felt what real failure was. The appearance of such a legendary figure naturally attracted their gazes in an instant. Chef Ouyang, Special Chef Yen is here. Ouyang Chinfeng, who was pacing back and forth at the entrance of the kitchen, heard the voice of the restaurant's apprentice. He instantly narrowed his eyes, then turned around and walked toward the entrance. Although Yen Yu's actions made him despise him, the other party had come to his restaurant to participate in the chef's challenge. He still had to give him some face. Ouyang Chinfeng welcomed Yen Yu. However, Yen Yu only coldly snorted. He did not look at Ouyang Chinfeng at all. In his eyes, Ouyang Chinfeng's cooking skills were just trash. His entire person was trash too. Yen Yu clasped his hands, his entire being incomparably confident. It was as though he had a card up his sleeve for this chef's challenge. He really had a card up his sleeve. When the surrounding crowd saw the handsome and tall Yen Yu, a look of admiration appeared on everyone's face. Although Yen Yu had betrayed the Valley of Gluttony, he had been the tablet of Gluttony's first rank for so many years. He still had some prestige and fame in the entire Valley of Gluttony. Many people knew him, and they knew how terrifying he was. That kid hasn't come yet. Could it be that he's afraid of losing, so he doesn't dare to come? The corners of Yen Yu's mouth twitched. He glanced at Ouyang Chinfeng, then at the majestic group of people downstairs. That group of people did not include Bufang. This group of people were basically chefs on the tablet of Gluttony. As chefs, they were naturally very interested in this chef's challenge. Ouyang Chinfeng furrowed his brows. This Yen Yu, who had torn off his mask, was even more arrogant. Moreover, he was fearless. Could it be that he did not know about Bufang's cooking skills? If he was careless, he might really fail miserably in an easy task. Suddenly, everyone let out a cry of surprise. That was because, from afar, a majestic group of people was coming over. Bufang wore the vermilion robe, calmly walking. Behind him was a huge metal puppet. Many people had witnessed how powerful that puppet was, so they did not dare to offend it in the slightest. As for the 2 sides, it was Yu and the rest. Xiaoya and Hua were holding hands, following behind Bufang. Their faces were filled with excitement. Although Xiaoya was now the Valley Master of the Valley of Gluttony, with Hua around, He had no way to make Xiaoya obediently stay at the place where the valley master should be. Yu's long black hair hung down, and she strode with her slender and fair legs, following beside Bufang. When they reached the first floor of the Noodle King restaurant, Bufang instinctively raised his head. He happened to see Yu, who was leaning against the window, looking at him with a playful expression. "You brat. Are you ready to lose in what position?" Yu grinned, looking at Bufang with a smile. Lose? Bufang's eyes were indifferent. The concept of losing did not exist in his dictionary. He could not lose. Once he lost, he would lose everything. This was something he would never allow. Hence, Bufang could only fight and work hard. Glancing at Yu, Bufang then stepped into the Noodle King restaurant. Ouyang Qinfeng's face revealed a joyful expression. He quickly went downstairs and brought Bufang up. Yu looked at Ouyang Qinfeng's expression. The difference in treatment between the two was too big, and it made Yu's heart turn cold. However, thinking of his trump card this time, the coldness on his face became even more intense. When he, Yu, defeated the dark horse, Bufang, this group of people would know how powerful a special grade chef was. Yu sneered. Then, he walked back to his stove. Bufang nodded at the crowd, then turned around and walked to his stove. The two of them looked up, and their gazes collided in the air. There seemed to be lightning flashing. The theme of our chef's challenge this time is dumplings. I hope you won't disappoint me, Yu said coldly. After saying that, he waved his hand, and the shadow chopping knife appeared in his hand. His mind flickered. An ice-cold chill instantly appeared, causing the temperature on the second floor of the Noodle King restaurant to drop by a lot. A dazzling and exquisite 8-petal snow lotus, which seemed to be made of ice, appeared. When the snow lotus appeared, everyone's eyes shrank, and they exclaimed in surprise. 8-petal snow lotus? It was actually an 8-petal snow lotus. This was an extremely high-grade medicinal ingredient, which was almost equivalent to a divine herb. No one would have thought that Yu would actually take out such an ingredient. Ouyang Qinfeng and the rest widened their eyes, feeling a little incredulous. Once this ingredient appeared, unless Bufang took out the Taoya's meat, he would not have any chance of winning. However, Bufang was restricted from using the Taoya's meat. This Yu was really despicable. He did not allow Bufang to use the Taoya's meat, but he used the 8-petal snow lotus, which was almost a divine herb. It seemed like Bufang was really going to lose this chef's challenge? Bufang's undefeatable legend was about to end. Chapter 774. The 8-petal ice crystal snow lotus was so beautiful. It was so beautiful that it attracted everyone's eyes, and they couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. Floating in the air, the lotus petals were as thin as a cicada's wings. They gently fluttered, and the patterns on the petals looked like they were drawing an exquisite painting. It was incomparably beautiful. As the flower swayed, a dense spiritual energy was emitted. It was accompanied by a cold air, causing everyone to feel their skin tighten slightly. It was a spirit herb that was close to a divine herb. Did Yu want to use this spirit herb to cook his next dish? Everybody took a deep breath as they thought about it. Indeed, a chef's challenge was where they could see a chef's true skills. Because no chef could bear the consequences of a chef's challenge. A divine herb was an extremely precious existence. Even in the royal court's holy land, it was hard to cultivate a divine herb. That was because a true divine herb needed time to grow. This 8-petal ice crystal snow lotus in front of them represented 8,000 years of age. One petal represented 1,000 years of age, and 8 petals meant that this spirit herb had reached 8,000 years of age. It was almost at the level of a 10,000-year divine herb. Could a spirit herb be cooked? Of course, it could be cooked. Not only could it be cooked, but the higher the level of a chef, the higher the requirement for ingredient. Spirit herbs were also an ingredient that they had to consider. Dishes cooked with good spirit herbs would be really delicious, and they would have earth-shattering healing effects. I have this 8,000-year 8-petal ice crystal snow lotus. You can't use the Taotia's meat. How are you going to defeat me? Yen Yu was so meticulous as he held the 8-petal ice crystal snow lotus in his hand. Everybody took in a breath of cold air. Indeed, Yen Yu was right. Without the white Taotia's meat that was close to the divine spirit realm, how could Bu Fong defeat his opponent? Many people felt sorry for Bu Fong, and they felt aggrieved for Bu Fong, because they knew that Bu Fong had been tricked by Yen Yu. Yen Yu knew that Bu Fong had the Taotia's meat, but he forbade Bu Fong from using it. And Bu Fong didn't know that Yen Yu also had an ingredient of the same level. That was why he was tricked. Yen Yu was very clear about Bu Fong's trump card, but Bu Fong knew nothing about Yen Yu. Their chef's challenge was not on equal footing at all. Bu Fong withdrew his gaze from the 8-petal snow lotus, and the corners of his mouth twitched. Then, he raised his hands, put his palms together, and lightly clapped them together. Whoosh! A ray of golden light instantly shuttled over and landed on Bu Fong's shoulder. Shrimpy was spitting bubbles, and its eyes were rolling around. This, looking at Xiaopi, who was lying on Bu Fong's shoulder, everyone was stunned. Could it be that Bu Fong was planning to cook this golden mantis shrimp that he was raising? The golden mantis shrimp was very strong and intelligent. Maybe it could fight against the 8-petal snow lotus. However, could Bu Fong really do it? In the distance, Great White, who was watching the chef's challenge with interest, saw the shrimp ancestor jump out. His hair stood on end. No, his skin exploded. His eyes widened, filled with disbelief. What did that kid want to do? Did he want to cook the shrimp ancestor? That was the shrimp ancestor, an overlord-level existence that swept through the endless sea region in the past. How could it be treated as an ingredient like this? He, Great White, still needed to hug the shrimp ancestor's thigh to ascend to the heavens. If the shrimp ancestor was cooked, what would happen to him? They had agreed to conquer the endless sea together, but he secretly became someone else's ingredient. At this moment, Great White's heart trembled. He roared, his face ferocious. He opened his mouth, revealing a mouthful of sawtooth-like teeth. No! It can't be used as an ingredient. Great White roared hoarsely, tears flowing from his eyes. Xiao Bai's gray eyes flashed. His fan-like hands grabbed Great White's clothes, dragging him away. Great White's hands swayed, his face filled with reluctance. It was as though he was going to be separated by life and death. Bu Fong was a little speechless as he looked at Great White, who was trying to put on a show for him. How did this guy know that he was going to kill Shrimpy? How could this guy be so shallow? Could it be that Xiaopi could only be eaten? Bu Fong reached out his hand, rubbing Xiaopi's head as the corners of his mouth rose. Xiaopi comfortably narrowed its eyes. Feeling Bu Fong's touch, the bubbles coming out of its mouth increased. You have the 8-petal snow lotus, and I have the golden shrimpy. It's hard to say who will win, Bu Fong said calmly after looking at Yen Yu. Yen Yu's eyes narrowed. This guy really wanted to use the shrimpy as an ingredient? It seemed like he had misjudged this kid. His heart was really ruthless. Bu Fong was too lazy to talk to Yen Yu. He patted Xiaopi's head, then turned around and returned to the stove. On the tree outside the Noodle King restaurant, there were experts standing. Wenren Shang, Mu Qing, and Lu Jelly were all leaning on the tree, watching the Noodle King restaurant's chef's challenge. Wenren Shang, who do you think will win this chef's challenge? Mu Qing's beautiful eyes turned, landing on Wenren Shang, who was holding a bamboo tube and pouring wine into his mouth. Bu Fong. Even if you think with your toes, you know that Yen Yu, that idiot, thinks that he can win with an 8-petal snow lotus? He's too young. Wenren Shang said. Mu Qing rolled her eyes. Wenren Shang was really confident in Bu Fong. Old Lu, what do you think? Mu Qing turned her head to look at Lu Jelly, who had a solemn face. Lu Jelly leaned against the tree, holding a book in his hand, slowly flipping through it. Facing Mu Qing's question, He casually flipped a page and said, "If Bufang can use the Taoya's meat, then Bufang's chances of winning will reach 65%. However, since Bufang is restricted from using the Taoya's meat, then Bufang's chances of winning will reach 80%. After Mu Qing heard that, she was slightly stunned. Why did his chances of winning increase? Did you forget that Bufang still has the Taoya's heart in his hand? Even if he uses a small piece of the Taoya's heart, Bufang will still win. Lu Jelly closed the book in his hand and said, "So what we should be concerned about now is, after Bufang defeats Yen Yu, who will he choose next?" Mu Qing furrowed her brows. "That's right, there's still the Taoya's heart." However, Mu Qing still felt that Bufang would not use the Taoya's heart. Although she did not know the reason, that was what she thought. Perhaps this was the so-called woman's intuition. Oh, the chef's challenge has begun. Watch carefully. Who knows, you might be able to find that kid's weakness. Wenren Shang chuckled and drank a mouthful of wine. He glanced at Mu Qing and Lu Jelly. The two of them nodded and watched the chef's challenge in the Noodle King restaurant seriously. Swish! Yen Yu took in a deep breath. He took out a bag of flour, and the shadow chopping knife sliced through it, tearing it apart. The shining white flour fluttered in the air, bringing with it a dense fragrance. There was also the vibration of spirit energy. The quality of this flour was very good. Just by looking at its snow-white color, it was enough to tell. In order to make dumplings, there were two main points. One was the dumpling skin, and the other was the dumpling filling. These two were equally important. The dumpling skin determined the texture, while the dumpling filling determined the taste. Sizzle, Yen Yu flipped his hand, and a light blue spirit beast egg appeared in his hand. The spirit beast egg flickered with lightning arcs, emitting waves of energy. Coldly smiling at Bufang, Yen Yu suddenly exerted force in his palm, and the light blue spirit beast egg was tossed into the air. The shadow chopping knife rapidly slashed down, instantly cutting the spirit beast egg into two halves. With a cracking sound, the egg liquid flowed down, landing on the flour that Yen Yu had prepared. On the shadow chopping knife, the egg yolk, which was flickering with lightning arcs, was separated and placed into a bowl. Yen Yu began to knead the dough. His kneading technique was very unique. It was obvious that he had done some serious research. Every time he kneaded, the flour would emit a faint rumbling sound. It was like the sound of raging waves crashing against the shore. This sound crashed into people's hearts, causing them to feel shocked. This kneading technique was indeed very shocking. Moreover, the dough that was kneaded in this way was very compact. Moreover, it would fuse the spirit energy of the flour and the egg liquid together. On the other side, Bufang also began to leisurely make the dumpling wrappers. The flour he wanted was from Ouyang Chinfeng. As the king of noodles, Ouyang Chinfeng naturally had top-notch flour in his store. The pure white and fragrant flour made Bufang very satisfied. He took out a blue and white porcelain bowl and filled it half to the brim with heavenly mountain spirit spring water. The spirit spring water was incomparably clear, and spiritual energy lingered around it. Of course, Bufang wouldn't start kneading the dough just like that. He didn't choose to add egg white like Yen Yu. Instead, he directly used water to knead the dough. He took out a purple crystal jar, removed the lid, and dripped a drop of dense crystal source purple essence into the heavenly mountain spirit spring water. Once the crystal source purple essence entered the water, it seductively spread out and quickly fused with the water, causing the heavenly mountain spirit spring water to be filled with dense spiritual energy. Yu's eyes already lit up. She stared at the crystal source purple essence that Bufang put away. She stuck out her rosy tongue and licked her plump red lip. She looked extremely charming. Hades Era's eyes also lit up. Crystal source purple essence. This was a delicious item. He didn't expect that a youngster like Bufang would actually have such an item. Bufang's expression was calm as he put away the crystal source purple essence. Then, he took out the Frost Blaze Path Understanding brew and poured some of it into it. The rich wine fragrance fused with the heavenly mountain spirit spring water. In the end, everyone looked over. The bowl of clear water was still as clear as ever. However, the difference was that there was actually a faint brilliance blossoming from the water. Bufang piled up the flour and dug a hole in the middle. He poured the heavenly mountain spirit spring water into the hole, covered it with flour, and started kneading. Bufang's kneading technique wasn't ordinary. His face was expressionless and indifferent as he kneaded the flour as if he was playing Tai Chi. Toward the end, Bufang suddenly exerted force in his palm, and true energy gushed out. The dough flew up and quickly rotated, turning into a ball. As the ball rotated, it emitted a tearing sound. Bufang gently pulled out his palm and struck the ball. His true energy unceasingly poured into the ball. This caused the ball to swell up. The ball of dough rotated, becoming bigger and bigger. Everyone widened their eyes in shock as they looked at this scene. Why were the two of them kneading the dough as if they were performing acrobatics? All of a sudden, Bufang's gaze became sharp. He spread out his 5 fingers and grabbed the ball. His 5 fingers sank deep into it, causing the ball to shrink in an instant and gather in Bufang's hand. Bufang pulled with both of his hands and the dough was stretched. The golden dragon bone kitchen knife spun, and the knife light flashed as it rapidly chopped down. The dough was cut into small pieces and landed on the stove. This series of movements was as smooth as flowing water, causing many people to be dazzled. The corner of Yan Yu's mouth twitched and he coldly smiled. Beautiful to win favor. In the next instant, he placed the kneaded dough to the side and began to prepare the ingredients. Next was the real key, and that was the dumpling filling. Yan Yu might not be able to win against Bufang on the dumpling skin. However, the dumpling filling depended on the ingredients. As long as the ingredients were good enough, Bufang would definitely lose. Yan Yu's fiery gaze turned to the floating 8-petal ice crystal snow lotus. He resisted the urge to roar. Then, with a spin of the shadow-slicing kitchen knife, the snow lotus was cut into 2 halves. In an instant, dense spirit energy gushed out. It spread throughout the entire place. Chapter 775. The shadow-chopping knife was fast and could cut shadows. The 2 sides of the knife had different colors. When it was swung at high speed, it seemed to disappear, which was very helpful in increasing the speed of the knife. This kitchen knife was a famous knife. It was because of this knife that Yan Yu was able to stand out on the tablet of gluttony and defeat many opponents. Although a big factor was that his opponents did not use their full strength, this famous knife could make Yan Yu's cooking skills so much more profound. It was enough to show how important a good knife was to a chef. The 8-petal ice crystal snow lotus was filled with spiritual energy. Yan Yu held it in his hand. Looking at the dazzling snow lotus, Yan Yu's eyes became a little dazed. This snow lotus was something he had paid a huge price to find. Because he had immersed himself in cooking, Yan Yu gradually fell in love with cooking. When it came to good ingredients, he would also show a fanatical look. This was completely different from his personality when he was in the ancient Jade Holy Land. Perhaps Yan Yu did not have any feelings for the Valley of Gluttony, but he absolutely loved cooking. Because he had already been fascinated by cooking. Today's chef's challenge was a chance for him, but it was also a chance to prove himself. Didn't Bufang defeat so many chefs from the top 10 of the Tablet of Gluttony in a chef's challenge? If he could defeat Bufang, it would prove that he was not a fake. His identity as a special grade chef was real. Hence, he was excited. He was so excited that the blood in his body was slightly boiling. The knife light seemed to disappear without a trace, cutting through the air in an instant. 8 lotus petals quietly floated down, landing on the jade plate that Yan Yu had prepared. These 8 lotus petals left the lotus pod and floated lightly. They were like pieces of ice that were as thin as paper, about to melt. Yan Yu's true energy was like silk, winding out, protecting the 8 petals that were as thin as a cicada's wings. The kitchen knife in his hand began to deal with the lotus pod. The knife light was shadowless. As it cut through, the milky white lotus pod seemed to be cut into pieces in an instant. A white liquid flowed out of it. Yen Yu's eyes were sharp and his hands were quick. He took a jade bowl and kept the liquid that flowed out of the lotus. A rich fragrance was emitted from the milky white liquid, bringing along a tranquil fragrance. As the fragrance lingered, it was as smooth as silk, causing one's body and mind to involuntarily relax. This milky white juice that exuded a faint fragrance was the essence of this 8,000-year-old spirit herb. The essence seemed to be faintly glowing. People couldn't help but cast sidelong glances at him. Yen Yu's face revealed an intoxicated expression. He took the 8 lotus petals and carefully placed them on the edge of the jade bowl. In the next moment, the lotus petals seemed to come to life and began to absorb the milky white juice in the jade bowl. Taking advantage of this time, Yen Yu began to make the dumpling filling. He took out a lot of ingredients, and the grade of these ingredients were not low. Even though there weren't any ingredients as high grade as the 8-petal snow lotus, many of these ingredients were already very rare and top-notch among ordinary ingredients. This time, the shadow chopping knife completely exploded with Yen Yu's knife skills. Everyone could barely see the blade of the knife. All they could see was that when Yen Yu waved the kitchen knife, there would be knife light shooting out from time to time. In an instant, the ingredients were cut into pieces. The spirit beast meat, spirit herbs, and other bits were mixed together, and the color was incomparably resplendent. He added some ice cubes and stirred it. At this time, Yen Yu finally had the mood to raise his head and look in the direction of Bufang. He was also very curious about what kind of ingredient Bufang would take out to deal with his 8-petal snow lotus. All of a sudden, everyone was stunned. This was because Bufang took out different ingredients from the system's dimensional storage. These ingredients gave them a huge shock. The grade of these ingredients was not low, but compared to Yen Yu's ingredients, they were not much better. Moreover, Bufang did not have an ingredient that could compete with the 8-petal snow lotus. Everyone was a little disappointed, and some people even shook their heads regretfully. Indeed, without using the Taotai meat, Bufang would lose without a doubt. How could ordinary ingredients defeat Yen Yu's 8-petal snow lotus? However, besides the ordinary onlookers, there were many chefs on the tablet of gluttony. Ordinary people could not see what was so special about Bufang's ingredients, but these chefs could see through the mystery with a glance. There were ingredients that flew in the sky, walked on the ground, and swam in the water. Almost all kinds of ingredients were prepared. With so many different kinds of ingredients mixed together, it was a huge test for the chef. This was because once the coordination was not good, the taste of the entire dish would be out of balance. Outside the window, Mu Qing, who was standing on a tree, instantly sucked in a breath of cold air. This Bufang really has guts. He really dares to cook like that. Wenren Shang, on the other hand, chuckled and said, "It's normal. This kid's innate talent is unparalleled. His creativity is something that you and I can't compete with. Also his guts. That kind of indomitable courage is what I admire the most about him. I can feel." Wenren Shang gulped down a mouthful of wine. Wenren Shang gulped down a mouthful of wine. Gulp, gulp. The wine flowed down his throat. Swish, after drinking to his heart's content, Wenren Shang suddenly exhaled, and the wine splashed everywhere. He could not help but laugh loudly. "What can you feel?" Mu Qing looked at the strange Wenren Shang and asked. Yen Yu wiped his mouth, gently exhaling a breath that reeked of wine. "I can feel that this kid's goal is the Sea of Stars." Hearing this, Mu Qing instantly rolled her eyes. Lu Jieli's face was solemn as he gently caressed the book in his hand. If it's really like that, then his chances of winning in this chef's challenge will increase a little. Hearing this, Mu Qing rolled her eyes again. All kinds of ingredients had been prepared. Bufang's eyes flashed with a bright light. These ingredients were very rich, so rich that ordinary chefs did not dare to easily touch them. To make dumpling fillings, he definitely needed to mix so many ingredients together. There was a strict requirement for the taste and texture of each ingredient. Once the mixing failed, the entire dish would be ruined. Bu Fong could not fail. Hence, this challenge was incomparably huge for him. Many tactful chefs sucked in a deep breath, solemnly watching this scene. Of course, to the audience, they only had eyes for the dazzling array of ingredients. The fact that Bu Fong had to process so many ingredients was simply too awesome. Green smoke twirled around his hand. Bu Fong raised the black turtle constellation wok, took a step back, and then opened his mouth. A bundle of gold mixed with red flames sprang out. In an instant, the spirit spring water in the black turtle constellation wok began to boil. When the water in the wok was boiling, Bu Fong's eyes narrowed. Then, he turned his head to look at Xiaopi, who was lying on his shoulder and spitting out bubbles. Xiaopi was spitting out bubbles when Bu Fong suddenly lifted him up. "Be good. Go inside and take a bath. Do as you please." Bu Fong lifted Xiaopi, reaching out his hand to rub Xiaopi's head as he gently said this. Xiaopi's straight compound eyes rolled around. Before it knew what had happened, Bu Fong's hand loosened. Then, Xiaopi's figure appeared to be free-falling, smashing into the steaming black turtle constellation wok. With a plop, water splashed everywhere. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Oh my God! That pitiful mantis shrimp was really cooked. In the distance, Great White, who was being pulled away by Xiao Bai, suddenly let out a hoarse cry. Both of his hands scratched the ground, causing crushed stones to fly everywhere. Smoke and dust filled the air. "Shrimp ancestor, you promised to be my companion in the world of mortals. You can't abandon your cute little shark." Xiao Bai's gray eyes twinkled. Then, he swung the red-hot war god stick, hitting the back of Great White's head, knocking him out. Directly dragging him away, those who added scenes without permission were knocked out and dragged away. Naturally, Bu Fong didn't care about Great White, who added scenes without permission. Would Xiaopi be burned to death by the boiling water? As long as the abyssal chili sauce wasn't added to the boiling water, Xiaopi wouldn't have any reaction. The higher the temperature, the more comfortable this fellow's bath was. Moreover, the golden energy on his body became denser. Buzz green smoke twirled around his hand. A moment later, the pitch-black dragon bone kitchen knife appeared in Bu Fong's hand. The muscles in his palm twitched, and the dragon bone kitchen knife spun in his hand. After twirling the knife, he flicked it, sending the ingredients flying. Then, it was time for Bu Fong to show off his knife skills. With the meteor knife technique at the top level, and the Overlord 13 Blade's 9th blade, Bu Fong's knife skills were enough to crush everyone in the Valley of Gluttony. Everybody was dazzled as they watched the knife in Bu Fong's hand dance. Countless ingredients were cut into pieces, and with a swishing sound, they were thrown into the wok. A spirit beast bird was pressed under Bu Fong's knife. The knife slashed horizontally, and with a ripping sound, the spirit beast meat was separated from its bones. A plump fish was also processed. As the fish scales fluttered, the fish bones were separated from the meat. In front of everybody's dumbfounded eyes, countless knife lights appeared like shooting stars, cutting all the ingredients into pieces. Thump, thump, thump. Countless ingredients fell into the black turtle constellation wok. It was as if it was raining. Xiaopi's numerous legs slid around in the black turtle constellation wok, and its compound eyes rolled around. It swam around comfortably, and sometimes, it would flip 360 degrees. It looked like it was having fun, and its long tentacles swayed slightly. Apparently, it was very happy in its heart. Specks of golden energy dissipated from it and were absorbed by the ingredient. After a long time, Bu Fong's hand shook, and he fished up all the ingredients. These ingredients had been soaked in water, and they were cooked a little. Moreover, with the energy on Xiaopi's body, they became dazzling and dazzling. The others didn't understand the mysteries, but how could Bu Fong not understand? Taking a big bowl, he mixed all the ingredients together, then began to stir. He took out a spirit beast egg that was the size of 2 fists. There were light green spots on the spirit beast eggshell. The back of the kitchen knife lightly knocked against the eggshell, and the eggshell was broken. The true energy in Bufang's hand revolved, and the egg inside the eggshell was evenly beaten. Then, he poured the egg evenly onto the dumpling filling, stirring it again. In the distance, Yenyu had also finished making the dumpling filling. The 8-petal snow lotus was mixed into the dumpling filling, causing the dumpling filling to emit a dazzling radiance, dazzling and eye-catching. Compared to Bufang's incomparably ordinary dumpling filling, the corners of Yenyu's mouth curled up, brimming with confidence. Without a top-notch ingredient like the 8-petal snow lotus, brat, you're just a piece of trash. The corners of Yenyu's mouth revealed a cold smile. In the next instant, he took the dough, and with a twist of his palm, it turned into plump dumpling wrappers. Yenyu raised his head, smiling evilly. The wrapping of the dumplings was completed in an instant, and 12 evenly distributed folds appeared on the surface of the dumpling. In the distance, Bufang also began to meticulously wrap the dumpling filling. Everyone held their breaths. The chef's challenge seemed to be entering the final stage. Chapter 776. Making dumplings was not a difficult task for Bufang and Yenyu. Their movements were extremely skilled. However, compared to Yenyu's movements, Bufang's movements were more methodical. Bufang's movements were not fast, but it was pleasing to the eyes. It was as though he was making a piece of art. It was filled with calmness. On the other hand, Yenyu was completely different. His movements were like a performance. That gorgeous and dazzling movement caused many people to sigh in admiration. As time passed, the number of dumplings the two of them made increased. Yenyu's gaze occasionally lifted up. His hands did not slow down as he looked at Bufang with a playful and cold smile. With a move of his hands, the 12 pleated dumplings were completely wrapped by him. Bufang's dumplings were the traditional crescent moon dumplings. The dumplings were as exquisite and elegant as the crescent moon. Although it did not look very shocking, that kind of exquisite beauty was very enjoyable. When Bufang finished wrapping the last dumpling and placed it on the porcelain plate, Yenyu had already cupped his fists and calmly looked at Bufang. In front of Yenyu, many dumplings were arranged neatly like a blooming flower. It was extremely dazzling and mesmerizing. On the other side, he had already set up the wok. Flames spurted out, burning fiercely under the wok. As a special grade chef of the Valley of Gluttony, Yenyu's cooking utensils were naturally not ordinary. That wok was also not ordinary. It was made of precious materials and could accurately conduct the temperature of the flames, as well as give feedback to the ingredients. The hot water in the wok was boiling, and the gurgling steam rushed up to the sky. It was misty and it attacked people's eyes. That steam hit their faces, bringing with it a slightly sweet taste. When the temperature was just right, Yenyu took out a row of steamers. This steamer was not big, but it was made of very exquisite materials. The material seemed to be emitting a sparkling radiance, as though it was flickering like the stars. Many people sucked in a breath of cold air, looking at the steamer in disbelief. A steamer that was emitting starlight. Without a doubt, the material used to make this steamer was starlight bamboo. Starlight bamboo was extremely precious, and this Yenyu actually used it to make a steamer. It was indeed a big deal. Yenyu placed the dumplings into the steamer basket one by one. The bottom of the steamer basket was covered with a layer of fragrant spirit herb leaves. The lush spirit herb leaves were glistening with a bright light. After placing all the dumplings into the 9-layered starlight bamboo steamer, Bufang placed them into the pot and began to steam. After doing all this, Yenyu took a step back and let out a long sigh of relief. Although he had been very confident, he didn't dare to be careless when it came to Bufang. This chef's challenge was related to his future. If he failed, Chu Chongqing would kill him immediately. If he won, with his understanding of Chu Chongqing, the other would definitely let him leave unscathed. Hence, no matter what, he had to win this chef's challenge. Moreover, losing to a little chef like Bufang, Yan Yu would also feel that he had lost all his face. He wasn't Ouyang Qinfeng or the others. He was Yan Yu, the special grade chef, who ranked first on the tablet of gluttony. His pride was something that Ouyang Qinfeng and the others could not understand, because they were not at the same level as him. Only by steaming the dumplings could he maintain the original flavor of the dumpling filling. Only then could the 8-petal snow lotus taste be fully displayed. Of course, Yan Yu also liked to use steamed dumplings. As for other methods of cooking dumplings, he didn't dare to agree. Taking out a white porcelain bowl, Yan Yu started to prepare the sauce while he was steaming the dumplings. When eating dumplings, one naturally needed sauce. Dipping the dumplings in the sauce would definitely increase the taste of the dumplings to another level. Therefore, to Yan Yu, the sauce was indispensable. However, how to prepare a good sauce was also a problem. To Yan Yu, this so-called problem wasn't a problem at all. Taking out a huge porcelain jar, he opened the lid of the jar. Instantly, a thick vinegar aroma wafted out. Everyone's eyes slightly lit up, and they couldn't help but take in a deep breath. This vinegar aroma wasn't pungent, but it was very alluring. Obviously, this vinegar wasn't ordinary. Yan Yu carefully went to a bamboo tube and scooped out half a spoon of vinegar from the jar. The color of this vinegar was dark brown. It was incomparably clear and didn't have any impurities. With a sniff, the sour smell instantly filled the air, causing everyone's taste buds to be instantly enveloped by the vinegar. It was so sour that the roots of one's teeth became a little soft. He poured the vinegar into the white jade bowl. Yan Yu carefully put away the vinegar. Then, he added the other seasonings into the white jade bowl. Of course, the vinegar was the main seasoning. Then, he added some spicy seasonings, causing the taste of the sauce to become even more fiery. After the sauce was prepared, it was placed to the side. Yan Yu's gaze landed on the steamer. Within the steamer, steam had already started to surge out. The fragrance of the dumplings finally slowly spread out. The entire Noodle King restaurant was instantly enveloped by this fragrance. Everyone couldn't help but twitch their noses, greedily sniffing the fragrance that filled the air. Within this fragrance, there was an irresistible ice-cold aura. That was the smell of the snow lotus. That was an ingredient that was close to a divine medicine. Sizzle! Sizzle! However, just as everyone was immersed in the fragrance that was spreading out from the steamer, the sound of the dumplings entering the wok rang out in an instant. Everyone's intoxicated mood was broken, and they couldn't help but turn their gazes toward the direction where the sound came from. Everyone was dumbfounded, because they realized that Bufang had actually placed the dumplings into the wok and deep-fried them. Xiaopi's entire body was emitting steam. He lazily laid on Bufang's shoulder, spitting out bubbles from his mouth. The black turtle constellation wok was filled with oil. A few pieces of dumplings were thrown into the wok by Bufang and started to deep fry. In just an instant, the dumplings started to churn, and white bubbles rapidly rolled out. The dumpling skin turned murky yellow at a speed visible to the naked eye. Bufang held a long pair of chopsticks in his hand. In the Noodle King restaurant, there were many chopsticks like this. The chopsticks entered the wok of oil and quickly flipped. Bufang's gaze focused on the dumplings in the wok. Then, in the next instant, he fiercely flicked it. That dumpling, steaming hot, flew out and landed on the porcelain plate. On the surface, there were still bubbles bursting. Everyone's eyes widened. They looked at Bufang with incomparable shock. Bufang actually wanted to deep-fry dumplings? Although deep-fried dumplings were good, it would lose the soft and smooth texture of the dumpling skin. Originally, he was already at a disadvantage in terms of ingredient. Now, he even wanted to deep-fry the dumplings. The only thing that could compete with Yan Yu was gone. That was a sure loss. Many people's hearts sank. When they saw that Bufang actually chose to deep-fry dumplings, they were a little silent. Their gazes were a little complicated. Outside the window, Mu Cheng and the others all furrowed their brows. They seemed to be a little puzzled as they looked at this scene. They didn't understand why Bufang would choose to deep-fry dumplings. This was a completely suicidal choice. When Yenyu saw that Bufang was making deep-fried dumplings, his eyes instantly emitted a bright light. The corners of his mouth curled up, revealing an excited smile. "Idiot! You want to use deep-fried dumplings to win against me?" Yenyu revealed a cold smile. In the next instant, his palm fiercely patted the steamer basket. True energy surged up, instantly filling the steamer basket. With a buzzing sound, within the steamer basket, hot steam billowed, spreading out from the cracks of the steamer basket. All of a sudden, the entire audience once again burst into an uproar. Yenyu was stunned, raising his head. Suddenly looking over, his eyes instantly shrank, because he realized that Bufang had changed again. This time, it was actually dry-dredged dumplings. What was going on? What did this kid want to do? Could it be that he wanted to cook all the dumplings? And as if confirming his guess, Bufang's next action completely caused an uproar. Because Bufang really cooked the dumplings in different ways, the fragrance surged, and the fried dumplings were out of the pot. The steamer basket was set up, and the dumplings were steamed. All kinds of dumplings were cooked by Bufang, placed on the stove. What kind of trick was this? At this moment, everyone became a little confused and puzzled. Everyone was a little confused by Bufang's cooking method. Those who originally thought that they had seen through Bufang were stunned. Cooking so many kinds of dumplings. Was Bufang going to make a big mess of dumplings? Bufang's hand turned. Instantly, a huge round blue and white porcelain plate appeared in his hand. That blue and white porcelain plate had blue and white intertwined, looking very plump. He placed the cooked dumplings on the plate. Fried dumplings in one position, fried dumplings in another position, dry-dredged dumplings in another position, steamed dumplings in another position. Yenyu's eyes finally shrank, feeling a trace of seriousness. However, at this moment, he no longer had the mood to care about Bufang. His palm fiercely patted the steamer basket. Instantly, true energy surged out, and the steam surging out of the steamer basket gradually converged. Yenyu moved the 9-layer steamer basket out of the hot pot. At this moment, everyone held their breath, staring at the 9-layer steamer basket. Bufang also took out the dumplings from the steamer basket, placing them on the stove. He placed the steamed dumplings on the blue and white porcelain plate. That porcelain plate was like a blooming flower. In the middle, there was a circle. That was where the sauce was placed. When eating dumplings, of course, there must be sauce. This point, whether it was Yenyu or Bufang, both agreed. Eating dumplings with sauce would definitely have a different taste. As for the sauce, the corners of Bufang's mouth rose. Then, with a shake of his hand, he took out the abyssal chili sauce. He scooped up a spoonful, poured it into the porcelain plate, and began to mix the sauce. What else was more suitable than the abyssal chili sauce to make a sauce? That kind of spicy to the point of exploding, spicy to the point of burning desire, spicy to the point of causing people to doubt the world, was extremely enjoyable. With the addition of Xiaopi's bathwater. No, Xiaopi's energy released into the spirit soup, the sauce would definitely be perfect. Slightly shaking the porcelain bowl, the black-red sauce in the bowl emitted a wave of tempting fragrance, giving people a feeling of exploring to the bottom. Pouring the sauce into the center of the blue and white porcelain plate, a splashing sound rang out. Then, Bufang finished his dish. Buzz steam rose from each type of dumpling, suddenly gathering above the porcelain plate. In the next instant, the steam above the porcelain plate actually changed, actually turning into the appearance of all kinds of spirit beasts. There were those that flew in the sky, those that walked on the ground, those that swam in the water. There was everything that one could think of. In the end, the entire dish emitted a sparkling radiance, the steam crisscrossing. It was too beautiful to behold. Bufang took off the velvet rope that tied his hair, and his hair broke free, scattering like a waterfall. Slightly raising his eyes, he looked at Yenyu, who had also finished filling the plate, and calmly said, 4 divisions crescent moon dumplings. Done. Yenyu also rubbed his hand, and a rich fragrance gushed out, accompanied by rolling steam. He grinned, coldly saying, Snow lotus crystal dumplings. Done. Chapter 777. 4 divisions crescent moon dumplings. Using 4 different cooking methods and 4 different ingredients, the dumplings were made from 4 different ingredients, flying in the sky, running on the ground, swimming in the water, and growing in the soil. Only now did the audience realize that Bufang's choice of ingredients had a purpose. It was a very creative dish, and after understanding the truth of the matter, many people were suddenly enlightened. Outside the window, Mu Cheng and the others were also shocked. They couldn't help but stretch their neck. Their eyes narrowed, and their faces revealed astonishment. 4 divisions crescent moon dumplings. It was really an extraordinary dish. Previously, they thought that Bufang wanted to use the method of frying dumplings. In the end, they realized that other than frying dumplings, Bufang had also chosen 3 other methods. The dumplings made in this way had all kinds of special characteristics, and it made people feel a lot of anticipation. Yenyu's snow lotus crystal dumplings were also out of the oven. They were steaming hot, but it gave people a feeling of coldness. The dumplings looked as if they were made of ice crystals. The skin of the dumpling became transparent, and the filling inside emitted a radiance. It was extremely dazzling and mesmerizing. Under the sunlight, it was like a crystal, emitting all kinds of radiance. It was extremely beautiful. Then, it was paired with the sauce that the 2 of them had made. These 2 dishes were extremely shocking, and it made people look forward to it. Who would be the judges for this chef's challenge? Many people looked at each other, hesitating. They didn't know who would be the judge. However, this hesitation didn't last long, because everyone was eager to take action. Noodle King Ouyang Chinfeng would definitely take one of the seats, and the remaining 4 seats would be divided among the contestants. You didn't say anything, already sitting on the judge's seat. Xiaoya and Hua held hands, widening their big eyes as they sat on their seat. Naturally, the audience didn't dare to say anything. Now, everyone knew that Xiaoya would be the next Valley Master of the Valley of Gluttony. That was the Valley Master. Who would be so free to provoke him? As for the last seat, a gloomy face appeared, quickly sitting on that seat. It occupied everyone's line of sight, occupying the last seat. Hades Era covered his face with one hand, his hair spilling out through the gaps between his fingers. His expression was gloomy. Since everyone was being so modest, then he would not pass on the responsibility. Moreover, looking at the dumplings, they seemed delicious. Although they might not be as delicious as the spicy strips, it was still not bad to have a taste. Just like that, the judges were decided. Yenyu's face darkened. Holy shit, this lineup of judges. What the F***ck? Can't you be a little more fair? Could you be a little more friendly? Yenyu's face darkened, and the corner of his mouth twitched. Luckily, although these judges were Bufang's people, Yenyu believed that as long as his dishes were delicious enough, these people wouldn't dare to give random marks. Strength was everything. Bufang, who was wearing the vermilion robe, used a clean white cloth to wipe the edges of the blue and white porcelain plate. Then, he single-handedly dragged the huge blue and white porcelain plate toward the judge's table. Yenyu held the white jade plate in his hand with a gloomy expression. He coldly looked at Bufang. 4 divisions crescent moon dumplings. To think that this kid could think of using different ingredients and different cooking method. Who knows, this kid might really overturn it. However, Yenyu was still very confident in his heart. He believed that with the help of the 8-petal snow lotus, he would definitely be able to suppress his opponent's dish. This was the confidence that came from having top-notch ingredients. Yen Yu gently exhaled, and his eyes regained his confidence. He carried the dumplings to the judges' table. The crystal-like dumplings were extremely gorgeous. Once they appeared, they attracted everyone's gazes. Many people cried out in surprise. As expected of Special Chef Yen, this dish had inherited the style of his gorgeous dishes as always. The elegance of his dishes was not something that ordinary chefs could compare to. Take Bufang's 4 divisions crescent moon dumplings as a comparison. Although it looked very unique, each of the dumplings was not gorgeous. They were all very ordinary. Compared to the crystal dumplings, they were completely inferior. At least in terms of appearance, they were much worse than the crystal dumplings. After Yen Yu placed the dumplings in front of the judges, he smiled and elegantly took a step back. Snow Lotus Crystal Dumplings, please have a taste. This is a special chef's special sauce. When paired with the crystal dumplings, it will be even more delicious. Outside the window, Mu Cheng and the others had also entered the Noodle King restaurant. They were also very curious about the taste of the dumplings. The sauce that Yen Yu had made was light blue, and it looked very refreshing. It really brought out the best in the crystal dumplings. The appearance of the 2 dumplings has its own merit. Gorgeous but not low-key, cool but not reserved, Ouyang Chinfeng nodded his head and commented. He rubbed his chin, then grabbed a pair of chopsticks and reached for the Snow Lotus crystal dumpling. The chopsticks grabbed the crystal dumpling, and with a slight force, the dumpling immediately trembled. Visually, one could feel the elasticity of the dumpling. This surprised Ouyang Chinfeng a little. After picking it up, the dumpling seemed to have juice flowing, and it gave off a slight trembling sound. Very unique, Ouyang Chinfeng's face became a little more serious. In the next instant it was dipped in the light blue sauce. When the crystal dumpling was dipped in the light blue sauce, it looked very tempting, and it whetted one's appetite. Then, with a little bit of anticipation, he took a bite. Huh! The moment he bit down, Ouyang Chinfeng's eyes widened. His eyes were filled with disbelief. It was as if a ray of light had flashed across his mind. This texture! The moment the dumpling entered his mouth, the dumpling skin was bitten through without any effort. After biting through it, the soup within the dumpling flowed out. An ice-cold feeling instantly spread on Ouyang Chinfeng's tongue. The elastic dumpling skin knocked against the walls of his mouth, giving him an incomparable enjoyment. The moment he bit into the dumpling filling, the steam rolled out, accompanied by the sauce's perfect sourness, causing Ouyang Chinfeng's lips to tremble. After the boiling hot dumpling filling burst forth, it quickly became ice-cold. This kind of ice-cold feeling made Ouyang Chinfeng feel as if he was experiencing the 2 heavens of ice and fire. Delicious. There was no doubt that it was delicious. Ouyang Chinfeng's eyes were incomparably complicated as he exclaimed in admiration. Although he looked down on Yen Yu, he had to admit that this fellow's culinary skills were really good. This crystal dumpling had completely stunned him. Of course, when the 8-petal snow lotus was mixed into the dumpling, it contained incomparably surging spirit energy. After eating it, it made Ouyang Chinfeng feel as if his entire body had been baptized. The dumpling's fragrance and taste had been greatly improved. This was the effect of top-notch ingredient. It could make ordinary dishes have a crushing taste. After a dumpling entered his stomach, Ouyang Chinfeng exhaled slightly. His breath was ice-cold, and his face was full of satisfaction. This dumpling was really delicious. Yu's face was cold. She did not use chopsticks, and she was too lazy to use them anyway. She directly reached out and grabbed a dumpling. The dumpling was very smooth, and it was a little cold. However, amidst the coldness, you could feel an explosive feeling of pregnancy. After dipping the dumpling in the sauce, Yu stuffed the entire dumpling into her mouth, not at all behaving like a virtuous lady. Her eyebrows slightly twitched as she looked at Yen Yu in surprise. As if feeling Yu's gaze, Yen Yu's face revealed a gentle smile. He nodded at Yu and bowed slightly. After eating the dumpling, you did not say anything. A dish that could make her eat it was obviously not bad. Although it was still lacking compared to the dragon blood rice. Yu thought in her heart. Xiaoya and Hua, the two girls, opened their eyes wide. Xiaoya held the chopsticks, stood on her chair, and stood on her tiptoes. She picked up a dumpling, dipped it in the blue sauce, and stuffed it into her mouth. Everyone looked at Xiaoya's eating manner and felt worried for her. The dumpling filled her mouth, and it seemed as if it was a little difficult to chew. This was their future valley master of the Valley of Gluttony. She was just a glutton, however. When the dumpling entered her mouth, Xiaoya's eyes instantly lit up, revealing a look of surprise. Her mouth bulged as she continuously nodded her head. Her mouth was mumbling something indistinctly. Hua also followed Xiaoya's example and picked up a dumpling. As she ate, her triflower snake eyes turned and slightly brightened. It was Hades' Era's turn. Hades covered his face with one hand, and his face was filled with melancholy. He grabbed the chopsticks and began to draw on the dumpling. After picking up a dumpling, he hesitated for a moment before Hades' Era put the dumpling down and picked up another dumpling. Using his chopsticks, he picked up 2 dumplings, dipped them in the sauce, and stuffed them into his mouth. The sour taste spread and the fragrance filled the air. Spirit energy surged and a cold aura surged. Era's nostrils instantly widened, and his eyes suddenly flashed with a bright light. "Oh, you young man! You look stupid, but your culinary skills are not bad. This dumpling is very delicious, but it is still lacking compared to the spicy strips," Hades' Era said. The corner of Yan Yu's mouth twitched. "Spicy your sister? Who the hell knows what spicy strips are? Look at your confused eyes. You don't know what spicy strips are, right? Look. This is it," Hades' Era said. After saying that, he took out 2 pitch-black stones that looked like charcoal. He lightly knocked on them, and instantly, a banging sound resounded. Yan Yu looked at Hades' Era as if he was looking at an idiot. "When you say that, doesn't your conscience hurt? That's AF * King Charcoal. Saying that his dumplings are not comparable to a piece of charcoal? If he could defeat Hades' Era, Yan Yu would definitely roll up his sleeves and fight 300 rounds with Hades. Alright, we have finished tasting Special Chef Yan's dishes. Now let's try Bufang's dishes," Ouyang Qinfeng hurriedly said. He felt that if he didn't say it now, Yan Yu would really fight with Hades' Era. Ouyang Qinfeng's words made everyone's eyes brighten. Finally, it was time to taste Owner Bu's 4 Divisions Crescent Moon dumplings. Everyone's face revealed a look of anticipation. Then, everyone's gaze turned to Bufang. Bufang's face was expressionless, as if he was stunned by everyone's gaze. He raised his hand and said, 4 Divisions Crescent Moon dumplings, please have a taste." As soon as he said that, the judges instantly exploded. Their chopsticks and hands moved toward the 4 Divisions Crescent Moon dumplings. Owner Bu's dishes were definitely worth looking forward to. Chapter 778. The judges' violent behavior scared the onlookers around them. They were dumbstruck as they looked at the group of people who looked like they were the reincarnations of starving ghosts. They looked at the dumplings on the blue and white porcelain plate, which were decreasing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Bufang was very calm. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and looked at them with an expressionless face. Xiaopi was lying on his shoulder. The heat on her body had already dissipated. She was blowing bubbles, and her compound eyes were looking at the group of judges who looked like they were the reincarnations of starving ghosts. There seemed to be a flash of curiosity in her eyes. Bufang raised his hand, patting Xiaopi's head. Yu's movements were very fast. Because she used her hands instead of chopsticks, she grabbed the fried dumplings on the porcelain plate in an instant. The skin of the fried dumplings was crispy. Once it was in her hand, it was a little hot. You couldn't help but raise her brows. However, this little bit of heat was nothing to her, who craved delicious food. With an ah sound, the fried dumpling entered her mouth. Her red lips slightly parted, and her lips shone. The oil on the fried dumpling stained her lips, which made her look even more enchanting. Crunch! Crunch! The crispy skin of the dumpling was bitten through. That kind of soft and crispy feeling made Yu's pitch-black eyes slightly shine. Her pearly white teeth bit down, instantly crushing the dumpling skin. In that instant, a wave of thick fragrance spread out in her mouth. This fragrance tickled her taste buds, causing all the pores on her body to shrink in that instant. A gust of wind blew. Nethery felt her whole body freeze on the spot. In an instant, the scene in front of her turned into a grassland. Thousands of green grass swayed in the wind. Among the grass, there were lush and tender leaves breaking out of the soil. Under the nourishment of the sweet dew, they grew strong and healthy. Without a doubt, what you ate was ingredients that grew in the soil. It was a kind of spirit herb that was full of vitality. Coupled with the right amount of water, after biting through the skin of the dumpling, the medicinal fragrance of the spirit herb and the dish burst out at the same time. Her nostrils slightly exhaled, as if there was a fragrance coming out of it. As expected, Bufang's dishes could bring her joy. Yu closed her eyes and continued chewing, her face slightly flushed. Xiaoya and Hua both grabbed the same type of dumpling. They were dry dumplings with plump skin and emitted hot steam. They looked rather plain. When Yu ate the fried dumplings, she forgot to dip them in the sauce, but Hua and Xiaoya, these two brats, happily dipped the dumplings into the sauce that Bufang had prepared. In the next moment, she narrowed her eyes and stuffed them into her mouth. Xiaoya really liked eating Bufang's cooking because she felt that her big brother's cooking always made her feel happy. Xiaoya. He bit through the side of the dumpling that was dipped in the sauce. The plump skin of the dumpling that was as smooth as white jade was immediately bitten through, and the soup rolled out from within. It was incomparably hot, and it was still boiling and emitting scorching air. As soon as Xiaoya entered her mouth, she immediately gasped for air from the scalding heat. Her small face instantly flushed red, and tears almost flowed out of her eyes. Hot, 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 Xiaoya was chewing as she chewed. As a seven-colored sky-devouring python, Hua didn't mind the little bit of heat. Her mouth, which was covered in sauce, opened up into an exaggerated arc. Then, she stuffed the entire dumpling into her mouth. Slurp slurp, Hua blinked his triflower snake eyes as he chewed. All of a sudden, as he was chewing, Hua's movements came to an abrupt halt. His mouth opened wide and his eyes narrowed. Xiaoya's face was flushed red, and her mouth was open as she breathed. It was unclear whether it was because of the spiciness or the heat. She turned around and looked at Xiao Hua's expression. She couldn't stop giggling. Hua opened his mouth, exhaled, and continued chewing. His triflower snake eyes grew brighter and brighter. His hands didn't stop moving as he continued to extend his hand toward the dumpling. Xiaoya was immersed in the taste of the dumpling. The skin of the dumpling was as smooth as jade, but once it was bitten, the gravy inside gushed out, bringing with it a rich fishy taste. The fishy taste wasn't fishy, and it wouldn't make people feel disgusted. Instead, it was a very enjoyable taste. Xiaoya closed her eyes, and a crystal tear rolled down from the corner of her eye. The little girl felt as though she had leaped up, turning into a fish with shining scales. With a splash, she dove into the water, unrestrained and carefree, riding the wind and breaking the waves in the sea. That kind of feeling was really very strange. Dried fish dumplings were really too delicious. Hades' nostrils flared, and his eyes were filled with extreme desire. He smelled a very familiar smell. That smell made all the hairs on his body stand on end. That was the smell of spicy strips. Hades' roared in his heart. He rushed out without a care for his own safety, unable to hide the surprise on his face. He grabbed the chopsticks and picked up a dumpling. He didn't know what kind of dumpling he had picked up. The dumpling was yellow on both sides, and it was a little flat. The fried surface was extremely crispy, and it emitted a rich fragrance. He had actually picked up a fried dumpling. However, that wasn't the focus of Hades' attention. His focus was on the abyssal chili sauce. Once his eyes saw the sauce, he couldn't move away anymore. In the next moment, he threw the whole fried dumpling into the bowl, dipping it in the sauce. Then, he picked it up happily. The originally golden fried dumplings had already turned into red dumplings at this moment, completely stained by the dark red sauce. Taking a deep breath, Era's face was filled with fascination. This familiar recipe, this familiar smell. Indeed, it was the smell of spicy strips that I was familiar with. Holding the dumpling with one hand, Era raised his head. His mouth opened, swaying as he put the dark red fried dumpling into his mouth. His lips slightly parted, just enough to cover the dumpling. In the next moment, he went in and out, intoxicated. Everyone looked at Hades' eating manner, and their faces were dull. They didn't understand who had invited this clown. Who ate dumplings like that? As the dumpling went in and out, Era's eyes became blurry. He felt the hot feeling of the abyssal chili sauce rubbing against his lips, making his pores open. With a smacking sound, he took out the fried dumpling. The sauce on it had been sucked clean. Era's eyes brightened. He pinched the fried dumpling, intending to put it into the bowl of sauce. However, you, who had sharp eyes, slapped it away with a face full of disdain. The corners of everyone's mouth twitched, and they were somewhat speechless. Yenyu clenched his teeth in hatred. He was actually beaten black and blue by this idiot, and he actually dared not say anything in front of this idiot. How infuriating! Facing Yenyu's hateful gaze, Hades seemed to be moved. He pinched the fried dumpling, turned his head, and revealed a smile. In the next instant, under Yenyu's gaze, he stuffed the fried dumpling into his mouth. Yenyu was speechless. Again. Was this guy really stupid? Who the hell eats dumplings for sucking? Suddenly, that dumpling was stuffed halfway into Hades' mouth. Hades' eyes lit up, and his teeth emitted a bright light. He fiercely bit down. Crack! That dumpling that was stuffed halfway was instantly bitten off. Oh! When Yenyu saw this scene, his lower body instantly shrank, and his whole body turned cold. Ouyang Chunfeng took in a deep breath. He was considered the one with the best table manners among all the judges. The dumpling he picked up was steamed, which was different from Yenyu's steamed dumplings that were like crystals. Bufang's steamed dumplings were standard. The dumpling skin was not thick, and one could almost see the filling inside. However, the other parts were as plump as jade. After picking up a steamed dumpling and dipped it in the sauce, Ouyang Chunfeng elegantly took a bite. With one bite, the dumpling skin was bitten open, and a turbulent fragrance and heat instantly surged out from the dumpling. That kind of spicy taste, as if it was burning, instantly surged out, causing Ouyang Chunfeng's eyes to become misty. This kind of texture, this kind of taste, that soft dumpling skin, that soft and bouncy meat filling. After taking a bite, his mouth was filled with heat. Ouyang Chunfeng's eyes became misty, and he felt as if there was a pair of wings growing out of his back, as if he could fly to the sky. The filling of this steamed dumpling was actually made from the meat of birds that could fly in the sky. The texture was surprisingly good, and it made people unable to stop eating. Coupled with that spicy sauce, it was a kind of experience that he had never experienced before. It was as if he was flapping his wings and circling around the crater of a volcano, feeling the scalding heat after the volcano erupted. Ouyang Chunfeng felt as if he had already fallen. The expressions of the judges fell into everyone's eyes. The different kinds of fragrances that filled the air made everyone involuntarily take in a deep breath. This fragrance really smelled good. Mu Cheng and Lu Jelly looked at each other. Wenren Shang's mouth was dripping with saliva, and he couldn't help but stare at the dumplings. He really wanted to snatch one and have a taste. It looked really too delicious. Is it really that delicious? Just smelling this fragrance makes you unable to stop eating. This dumpling is really too creative. Flying in the sky, walking on the ground, swimming in the water, and growing in the soil. All kinds of different ingredients, coupled with the excellent cooking methods, produced a delicious taste that will definitely make people fall in love. The surrounding people chattered noisily. They were all extremely envious and they really wanted to try it. Yen Yu's eyes shrank. Impossible. Impossible. His ingredients are so trashy. How could he make dumplings that are more delicious than my snow lotus crystal dumplings? Yen Yu's face instantly became deathly pale. Then, he unwillingly took a step back and let out an angry roar. Bufang looked at Yen Yu, who was on the verge of collapsing, and the corners of his mouth curled upwards. In the end, he was still too young. Good ingredients did not necessarily mean that he could cook a delicious dish. If the cooking method was not appropriate, the taste of the ingredients would also be lost. Yen Yu didn't seem to understand this. Although the ingredients that Bufang had chosen were not very high grade, coupled with the excellent cooking method, the taste of the dumplings were enough to disregard the difference between the ingredients. Moreover, before cooking, Bufang had washed the ingredients in shrimpies bathwater. Oh no, the spirit water that was emitting energy. After being soaked in the bathwater that could improve the taste of the ingredients by several grades, the taste of the cooked dumplings would naturally be extraordinary. Slap, slap. After the judges finished all the dumplings, they put down their chopstick. Yen Yu's face became deathly pale. His eyes shrank and a frightened expression appeared on his face. According to this trend, he was afraid that he would lose. He couldn't lose. Once he lost, he would be killed by Chu Chongqing. He had used the ancient jade lock to deal with Chu Chongqing, and he had stabbed him when he was at his weakest. At that time, Chu Chongqing would definitely hold a grudge. Thus he knew that if he lost the chef's challenge, he would die without a doubt. In order to ensure that he could win the chef's challenge, he even took out the 8-petal snow lotus. He couldn't lose. Ouyang Qinfeng opened his eyes. Yu Xiaoye and the others also looked at Bufang and Yen Yu. The onlookers felt their hearts shiver. They knew that the winner of this chef's challenge was about to emerge. In the end, who would be the winner? Many people's hearts were filled with curiosity. In the distance, a figure wearing a long robe walked in the air. With each step, the illusionary void would tremble, like the sound of a morning bell ringing. It was Chu Chongqing, who had finished supervising the workers and rushed over. Chu Chongqing's face was solemn. His cold gaze shot out and landed on Yen Yu, whose face was deathly pale. Yen Yu raised his head and saw Chu Chongqing. His pupils shrank. Ouyang Qinfeng, Xiaoye, and the others used their mental energy to communicate for a while. In the end, they decided on the winner and loser. Ouyang Qinfeng coughed, turning his head to look at Bufang and Yen Yu, saying in a low voice, "The final winner of this chef's challenge is 4 divisions crescent moon dumplings." As soon as he said that, the crowd became silent. Yen Yu's eyes shrank and he roared unwillingly. He looked at Bufang with hatred, then turned around and fled. Chapter 779. Chu Chongqing stepped through the air, his long robe fluttering in the wind. His long sleeves fluttered, and his white hair and beard billowed. His eyes were incomparably sharp, coldly staring at Yen Yu. It was as if there was lightning within them. Yen Yu was greatly shocked in his heart. He felt a frightening, killing intent lock onto his body. He was extremely shocked and furious. Without the slightest hesitation, he let out a roar and rushed out of the Noodle King restaurant. He lost the chef's challenge. This was something Yen Yu had never imagined. He had never thought that he would lose to Bufang, and under the circumstances of using such a precious ingredient. It should be known that he had used an ingredient that was close to a divine herb. Using such an ingredient in a chef's challenge already made his heart ache. However, if he could win the chef's challenge, it would not be too much of a loss for him. A spirit herb that was close to a divine herb saved his life. It was not a loss at all. After all, if he lost the spirit herb, he could continue to search for more. However, if he lost his life, the divine herb would no longer have any meaning to him. Yanyu was clear that Chu Chongqing definitely wanted to kill him. Why did Chu Chongqing not appear during the chef's challenge? Why did he only appear after the chef's challenge had ended? It was to kill him. Chu Chongqing was probably afraid that he would not be able to control himself during the chef's challenge. That was why he did not come to watch the chef's challenge. The sudden turn of events caused everyone to be slightly stunned. Then, everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. Was the Great Elder going to kill Yanyu? Yanyu was a special grade chef of the Valley of Gluttony. Wouldn't this be a huge blow to the Valley of Gluttony? The Valley of Gluttony did not have many top chefs. It would be a pity if one of them died like this. Many people did not know what had happened in the Inheritance Land, so they did not know that Yanyu had betrayed the Valley of Gluttony. Or perhaps, Yanyu was not even a member of the Valley of Gluttony. Bufang rubbed his hair, calmly looking at Yanyu, who had turned to run. When Yanyu turned to run, the resentment in his eyes made Bufang slightly furrow his brows. Resentment? This fellow dared to look at him like that? Bufang gently exhaled. In the next instant, his hand flipped, and the black turtle constellation walk appeared in his hand. Energy flowed around the black turtle constellation walk, and there seemed to be an earthy yellow halo flickering on it. With a long whistle, Bufang's gaze turned cold. His hair fluttered in the wind, and in the next instant, the black turtle constellation walk was thrown out by him. As the black turtle constellation walk spun, the air let out an unbearable rumble, as if it was about to be torn apart. Yanyu hurriedly fled. He could no longer care about anything else. Chu Chongqing's murderous aura locked him, making his pores tighten. He knew that if he didn't run, he would die. Suddenly, the sound of something tearing through the air resounded behind him. Yanyu's gaze turned cold as he turned his head to look behind him. He saw a black walk spinning as it whizzed over. The black walk glowed with an earthy radiance and was filled with violent energy. This was Bufang's black turtle constellation walk. Yanyu naturally recognized it. Who would have thought that this guy actually dared to attack? You're courting death. Yanyu was enraged. This guy had defeated him in the chef's challenge and cut off his path of survival. Now, he still wanted to stop him from escaping. It was simply unforgivable. With a move of his mind, several turbid yellow jade talismans appeared in his hand. The jade talismans were filled with mysterious patterns. True energy poured into the patterns, making them look as if they were alive. Buzz, a buzzing sound echoed. In the next instant, the jade talismans were thrown out by Yanyu. Sizzle! Sizzle! The jade talismans exploded in the air, and in an instant, they turned into several huge lightning figures. These were the spirit talismans of the ancient Jade Holy Land. The ancient Jade Holy Land was different from the other Holy Lands. They were good at making spirit talismans. As a member of the ancient Jade Holy Land, Yanyu naturally had many spirit talismans in his hands. The spirit talismans that transformed into lightning giants were also one of the ancient Jade Holy Land's technique. Its power was not weaker than the ancient Jade Lock. As soon as the lightning giants appeared, they looked as if they were wearing armor. As they stepped on lightning, they opened their mouths, revealing a pitch-black hole. Lightning shuttled back and forth, creating a series of rumbling sounds. The black turtle constellation walk whizzed over, directly smashing towards the lightning giants. Numerous lightning giants raised their hands and fiercely slapped towards the black turtle constellation walk, intending to smash it in one move. Yanyu's heart ached and his mouth trembled. Those giant spirit talismans were extremely precious items. He only had a few in his hands, and they were used to protect his life. Today, he had actually used them all at once. However, in order to survive, even though Yanyu's heart ached, He had no other choice. Chu Chongqing walked in the air as if he could shrink the ground to an inch. His speed was so fast, and each step he took shook the void and made it explode. His eyes seemed to have lightning bolts as he coldly stared at the fleeing Yanyu. It was as if he was looking at a dead man. Although Yanyu's strength was not bad, in front of Chu Chongqing, who was an almighty, he was as weak as an ant. However, the giant spirit talisman attracted Chu Chongqing's attention. Boom! Bu Fang's face was incomparably calm as he watched the black turtle constellation walk and the giant spirit talisman collide. As for the black turtle constellation walk, Bu Fang was not the slightest bit worried. That was a god of cooking set. Not to mention a mere lightning giant, even a real lightning tribulation might not be able to leave a mark on the black turtle constellation walk. The lightning giant and the black turtle constellation walk collided. A deafening explosion instantly erupted, and lightning bolts shot out. Many people in the surroundings let out cries of alarm as they hurriedly dodged. The black turtle constellation walk was sent flying back, but the lightning giant was also shattered. The coldness at the corner of Yan Yu's mouth became even thicker. If there was a chance, he would definitely kill this Bu Fang. Time and time again, he had ruined his plans. As Bu Fang dragged the black turtle constellation walk, he felt the lightning flickering on the surface of the black turtle constellation walk. The faint numbness from the lightning caused Bu Fang's eyebrows to rise. "You youngster, do you need I to make a move? I will make a move. As long as you say the word and give me 3 chili strips, you can make a move. If that kid can take a step forward, you can deduct 1 chili strip from I. How about it?" Hades' Era moved closer to Bu Fang and said with a smile. Bu Fang glanced at Hades' Era, and the corners of his mouth instantly rose. Why did he still need Hades to make a move? With him around, that Yen Yu would not be able to escape. What Bu Fang needed to do was to make Yen Yu's footsteps slow down for a moment. His mind flickered. A white magic array instantly appeared beneath Bu Fang's feet. The magic array revolved, and in the next instant, a crystal glass knife cabinet slowly emerged from the magic array. That knife cabinet shone brilliantly, and it was extremely beautiful. Inside it there were many kitchen knives. Many people who saw this scene involuntarily sucked in a breath of cold air. This was Bu Fang's knife cabinet. Within it there were many kitchen knives belonging to the top 10 chefs of the Tablet of Gluttony. Noodle King Ouyang Chenfeng's kitchen knife was one of them. Ouyang Chenfeng's face was filled with bitterness. Looking at the knife cabinet, his eyes were filled with complex emotions. Looking at the cicada wing knife in the cabinet, his heart trembled. However, he was not discouraged. If he wanted to take back the cicada wing knife, there was only one way, and that was to work hard and cultivate. He had to raise his culinary skills and defeat Bu Fang fair and square to take back his kitchen knife. This was his goal, and it was also his motivation for the next step. Yen Yu's flying figure suddenly stopped, and his face revealed an expression of shock. His body suddenly flipped in the air, and in the next instant, the shadow chopping knife flew out of his hand. "My knife!" Yen Yu's eyes shrank and he roared with a heart-wrenching voice. The shadow chopping knife was his life knife, and it was the key to supporting his culinary skills. If his kitchen knife was taken away, Yen Yu's culinary skills would drop by many levels. Thus, he would not allow Bu Fang to take away his kitchen knife. The veins on his forehead were bulging. Yen Yu's hand tightly gripped the kitchen knife, and he would not let go even if he was beaten to death. Boom! However, with this delay, Chu Chongqing landed not far from Yen Yu. Yen Yu's body stiffened and his face was filled with fear as he looked in Chu Chongqing's direction. There, a pitch-black spear appeared in Chu Chongqing's hand. That spear was the weapon that Chu Chongqing had condensed with all of his energy to kill Yen Yu. Giant Spirit Talisman. Block it for me. Yen Yu panicked. He controlled the remaining 2 giant spirit talismans to block in front of him. Then, he threw away the kitchen knife, turned around, and continued to run. He knew that if Chu Chongqing caught up to him, he would die without a doubt. Facing an almighty, he had no power to resist. Run? When you used the ancient jade lock to torture me, why didn't you run? Chu Chongqing said coldly. His eyes were cold, and he domineeringly grabbed the giant spirit talisman's body. The muscles on his arms bulged, and with a loud roar, he tore the lightning giant apart. The sky was filled with lightning arcs, and Chu Chongqing's eyes were extremely cold. In the next instant, the spear swung, and with a ripping sound, it was thrown out. The illusionary void cracked and twisted. Yan Yu wanted to run, but when he turned around, his soul almost left his body. The true energy in his body surged, and a soul ladder appeared above his head. A bright star shone, illuminating everything. However, facing Chu Chongqing's terrifying power, Yan Yu almost lost all hope. That spear came with an irresistible force, tearing apart everything in its path. Under Yan Yu's magnified gaze, he was nailed to the ground. His chest burst open, and fresh blood gushed out, staining Yan Yu's clothes. Yan Yu was howling, and his entire body couldn't move. His face was full of fear and begging for mercy. The shadow chopping knife fell into Bu Fang's hands. He held the kitchen knife, playing with it for a while, then prepared to put it back into the crystal knife cabinet. Although this kitchen knife was a famous knife, it couldn't compare to the dragon bone kitchen knife. Chu Chongqing clasped his hands, calmly walking toward Yan Yu. The entire place was silent. The great elder had personally come to deal with Chu Chongqing. What had happened? Yan Yu struggled, but no matter how much strength he used, he couldn't pull the spear out. Chu Chongqing, kill me. The Valley of Gluttony will be completely finished. The ancient Jade Holy Land will disregard everything and attack, until the Valley of Gluttony is destroyed. Yan Yu roared. Chu Chongqing walked slowly, and the wind was gentle. Yan Yu's face was filled with fear. Suddenly, in the next instant, on Yan Yu's body, the light of a talisman flashed. That light shot down, falling into the void. Space distorted as a blurry silhouette appeared. A terrifying aura instantly spread out, causing everyone to hold their breaths in an instant. Chu Chongqing felt the pressure on his body, and his face changed slightly. The silhouette in the void floated high up in the air, radiating resplendent light. Sir, stop. Yan Yu can't die. Once he dies, this old man's anger, a mere valley of gluttony, can't bear it. The light shadow said. Chu Chongqing's eyes shrank, his face cold. Yan Yu coughed out blood, looking at the light shadow, and laughed excitedly. I said, you can't kill me. The consequences of killing me, your valley of gluttony can't bear it. Yan Yu said excitedly as he coughed out blood. In the void, the white light shadow said calmly. Its words were filled with an inviolable sense of superiority. Great Saint Sovereign, I beg you, help me take back the shadow chopping knife. Yan Yu grabbed the spear that pinned him to the ground. His eyes were filled with passion as he shouted. As soon as those words came out, Chu Chongqing's face changed. Bu Fang's brows furrowed. That white light shadow, with its terrifying pressure, turned and covered Bu Fang. Chapter 780. The light shadow's gaze suddenly turned and landed on Bu Fang. Yan Yu was still roaring crazily on the ground. His eyes revealed a crazed look, and his face was ferocious and full of resentment. That's right. He hated Bu Fang. Everything had happened because of Bu Fang. If he had won this chef's challenge, he would have been able to escape safely. It was all because of this guy. Yan Yu hated Bu Fang to the core. More importantly, Bu Fang had stolen his shadow chopping knife. The shadow chopping knife. It was a famous knife that he had painstakingly obtained. With it, he had been able to sit on the first rank of the tablet of gluttony for so long. Today, Bu Fang had dared to steal his famous knife. Hence, at this moment, he roared crazily. If the light shadow wanted to save him, it wouldn't hurt to help him take back the shadow chopping knife. At the same time, he would also kill this little chef. He knew the identity of this light shadow. It was the ancient Jade Holy Land's holy saint, an existence just below the saint's sovereign. The holy saint's cultivation base was definitely beyond everyone's imagination. Yenyu believed that no one would dare to go against the holy saint's words. As the great elder of the Valley of Gluttony, Chu Chongqing definitely knew what the holy saint's identity meant. A holy land, a holy saint, and a saint sovereign. The holy saint was an existence that served the saint's sovereign. When the saint's sovereign cultivated in seclusion, many important matters of the Holy Land were handled by the Holy Saint. For example, although the Heavenly Spring Holy Land's amethyst elder had a strong cultivation base, he was still not a holy saint. Hence, one could imagine how noble and powerful a true holy saint was. At this moment, the light shadow of a holy saint was floating in the Valley of Gluttony. The light shadow's gaze was fixed on Bufang. He felt as though his breathing was about to stop, and he felt extremely uncomfortable. Although it was just a light shadow, the power it possessed had long surpassed Chu Chongqing's realm. What Yenyu said, is it true? If so, then hand over the famous knife. Otherwise die, the light shadow said. Its voice lingered around the entire place. Yenyu's face was ferocious as he roared crazily. Chu Chongqing's face stiffened. He was so angry. Bufang looked on indifferently. Holding the shadow-chopping blade that belonged to Yenyu, he tilted his head and glanced at the figure in the sky. Then, clang! The shadow-chopping blade was placed into the crystal cabinet by Bufang. The brilliance of the array flickered, and in the next moment, the crystal knife cabinet slowly sank into the array. You want the returning shadow chopper? Sure. Let him use his cooking skills to defeat me again. If you want to take it by force, there's no way, Bufang said as he looked at the light figure expressionlessly. As soon as he said that, Chu Chongqing's face changed. He had never thought that Bufang would say something like that. Was he not afraid of death? He was a saint sovereign of the ancient Jade Holy Land. If he wanted to kill him, it would be as easy as killing a fly. What an arrogant kid! How many years has it been since someone dared to talk to me like that? The light figure was still looking at Bufang as it floated in the air. However, Yenyu is a member of my ancient Jade Holy Land. The shadow-chopping blade naturally belongs to my ancient Jade Holy Land. What's the harm in taking it by force? The light figure said. In the next instant, that light figure seemed to have passed through the void. In an instant, it appeared in front of Bufang. A terrifying pressure rolled up waves of air. In that instant, the Noodle King restaurant seemed to be on the verge of collapse. The surrounding people were all terrified. No one had expected such a thing to happen. Chu Chongqing wanted to kill Yenyu, and Yenyu actually had such a powerful backer. That light figure was so arrogant that the Great Elder didn't even dare to move to be able to make the Great Elder, who was already an almighty, not dare to move. What was the origin of that light figure? You opened her mouth. Her lips were red because she had eaten too much abyssal chili sauce. Xiaoya and Hua had the same expression. These two little girls couldn't help but take deep breaths as they curiously looked at the light figure. Hades' era was a little depressed. He covered half of his face as he calmly looked at the light figure. He gently sighed. Xiao Bai's gray eyes moved. With a clang, the red-hot war god's stick flew out and landed in his hand. On his forehead and back, there were ferocious spikes extending out. In his gray eyes, there were black particles moving. In the next instant, the metal wings on his back suddenly spread open. That light figure was pressuring Bufang. A terrifying pressure spread out, causing the entire Noodle King restaurant to creak. It seemed like it couldn't bear the pressure anymore. That pressure was too terrifying. Many people quickly retreated. Some even had the urge to kneel down. As for Bufang, because he had the system, his immunity to pressure was very high. Thus, his face was still expressionless. In the eyes of the audience, they all revealed a look of admiration. This neither servile nor overbearing attitude was worthy of being Bufang. All of a sudden, a red-hot iron stick swept out, smashing the overflowing pressure of the light figure. The light figure's head was smashed, but the pressure didn't disappear. The light figure slowly became blurry. In the next instant it reappeared in the distant sky. Its entire body was blooming with light, and it wasn't injured at all. It seems like you don't want to hand over my ancient jade Holy Land's shadow-chopping knife. If that's the case, then you can die. The silhouette seemed to be a little impatient, and its cold voice instantly spread out in the void. Xiao Bai's gray eyes flashed. In the next instant, the war god's stick aimed at the light figure in the sky. The war god's stick rapidly lengthened, as if it wanted to pierce through the light figure in an instant. However, the light figure slightly stretched out a hand. It seemed like a long sleeve was hanging down, and a finger touched the red-hot war god's stick. It actually stopped the stick from advancing even an inch. This, many people sucked in a breath of cold air. Indeed, it was worthy of being able to release such a terrifying pressure. It was an existence that even the great elder was afraid of. With just a finger, it actually blocked the stick of Xiao Bai, who could kill an almighty existence. Xiao Bai's eyes flashed, and the lines on his body flashed. It seemed like he wanted to increase his power, allowing the long stick to break through the finger. It's useless. In this valley of gluttony, you are all ants in front of me. Just be obedient and serve me. Boom! All of a sudden, the light figure opened its mouth and spoke halfway, but its voice stopped abruptly. A hand slowly pierced through the chest of the silhouette. The hand pierced through the silhouette's chest and held onto a mysterious rune. Really? Too much nonsense. Listening to it makes I so irritated. Nether King Erha's hair fluttered in the wind, and a wicked smile appeared on his chiseled face. Although I really want to listen to you talk for a while, I have received 3 spicy strips from Bufang, young man. If I let you say one more word, one of my spicy strips will be deducted, said Hades' Era. The light figure stiffly turned its head, its face bewildered. How was it that this fellow was able to hide within the glowing shadow and use 9 small arrays to conceal his aura with a single glance? You! The light figure opened its mouth, trembling as it spat out a word. Hades' Era's eyes widened. A moment later, his hair stood on end. Shut up! Don't talk anymore! Nether King Erha's eyes were filled with anxiety. He turned his head to look at Bufang's direction and found that Bufang was shrugging his shoulders. His fingers, which were pointing at 3, immediately dropped by 1, turning into 2. Hades' Era's gloomy face twisted. His heart ached so much that it was hard to breathe. 1 spicy strip was missing. God damn it! Hades was so angry that his kidneys hurt. He exerted force in his palm, crushing the light symbol. The light figure was stunned. Yen Yu, who was laughing crazily on the ground, was also stunned. Hades' Era's tears scattered in the sky. He grabbed the light figure's body with both hands and tore it apart with a ripping sound. The light figure instantly shattered in the air, turning into specks of light and dispersing. The glowing figure's head was filled with disbelief and confusion. What had happened? Was there a mistake in opening it? It was said that he was invincible, it was said that everyone else was an ant. The light figure opened its mouth, as though it wanted to vent the unwillingness in its heart. However, Hades' Era's eyeballs almost popped out. He kicked out and crushed the light figure's head, making it hard for the light figure to speak. Crack! Yen Yu's mind trembled. The moment the light figure shattered, something in his body seemed to collapse as well. His head was in extreme pain, as though it was being torn apart. A miserable howl rang out from Yen Yu's mouth. Chu Chongqing came back to his senses. He took a deep breath. A holy saint's clone was crushed just like that. This guy, who looked so depressed, was a little too strong. However, now was not the time to think about such things. Chu Changxing's eyes suddenly became sharp. He coldly looked at Yen Yu, who was nailed to the ground by a long spear. He took a step forward and instantly appeared beside Yen Yu, who was screaming miserably. He raised his hand, and energy revolved in his hand. In the next instant, boom! A loud explosion rang out, causing everyone's heart to jump. Then, everyone looked at the spot where Yen Yu had been nailed to death in shock. At that moment there was only a huge palm print left. It had caved in, and Yen Yu's body had already turned into a mist of blood. He couldn't be any more dead. Yen Yu was dead in the end. The first special grade chef of the Tablet of Gluttony had died in the hands of the Valley of Gluttony's great elder. Everyone felt a chill in their hearts. They took in a breath of cold air. Chu Changxing pulled out the long spear. Then, the long spear turned into energy and dispersed. The light figure exploded, and Yen Yu died tragically. Xiao Bai also retracted his metal wings, returning to his harmless appearance. He carried the victory stick, standing behind Bufang. Hades' era had returned to Bufang's side. He was hugging Bufang's shoulder, talking and laughing. However, Bufang's face was still calm, without any expression. Sometimes he shook his head, and sometimes he nodded. Hades's face also changed. Sometimes it was sad, but in the end it remained sad. I miscalculated. I didn't think that thing would actually open its mouth and say something. A spicy strip, gone just like that. I hate it. Hades was so angry that his face twisted. Chu Changxing did not say anything. The clothes on his back were still fluttering. Bufang held the black turtle constellation walk in his hand. He suddenly turned his head, looking at Mu Cheng's group of 3. His eyes moved, falling on Mu Cheng's body. The next opponent of the chef's challenge is you. Chapter 781. Yen Yu was dead. Chu Changxing's long spear had pinned him to the ground. Then, he had smashed the ground with his palm. His flesh and blood had turned into nothingness. No one dared to breathe loudly as they watched the scene in a daze. A top chef of the Valley of Gluttony had died just like that. Not even his bones were left. Many people understood the whole story. It seemed that Yen Yu had betrayed the Valley of Gluttony. This special grade chef, who was ranked first on the Tablet of Gluttony, wasn't a member of the Valley of Gluttony. He was a traitor from another holy land. The other party had summoned that light shadow, and even Chu Changxing was a little afraid of it. However, things had ended in such a dramatic way. Everyone was speechless when they saw Nether King Er Ha gritting his teeth and crying. That insufferably arrogant light figure, that incomparably domineering light figure, was actually crushed by a single slap from this clown. Bufang didn't care much about it. It was the other party who had come to find trouble. If the other party hadn't said that he wanted him dead, Bufang wouldn't have used the spicy strip to lure Hades' era and make him take action. He had thought that the light shadow was really strong, but in the end it was just a paper tiger. Hades' era had instantly killed it. The matter had ended. Bufang had won the chef's challenge. He was one step closer to the completion of the temporary task. Bringing Yu, Xiao Bai, and Hades' era, he slowly left, disappearing from the audience's sight. The audience could only hear the sound of Hades' era bargaining with Bufang. Mu Cheng's face was incomparably solemn. Looking at Bufang's departing figure, she let out a long sigh. Bufang's meaningful gaze before he left, as well as his words, caused her hair to stand on end. Was she the next one? In the end, it was her turn to fight. She had been observing Bufang's chef's challenge as a bystander. Now that she was going to have a chef's challenge with Bufang, she still felt a huge pressure. However, this pressure did not make her afraid, but excited. He was so excited that his legs involuntarily tightened. Mu Cheng was also a special grade chef, and she was ranked second on the Tablet of Gluttony. Of course, if she really wanted to compete for first place, she could easily do so. After all, Yen Yu's culinary skills were somewhat superficial. Although it was there, it was somewhat unworthy of the name. Lu Jelly stood beside Mu Qing. He opened a metallic book in his hand and gently exhaled. He extended his hand and patted Mu Qing's shoulder, wishing her good luck. Bufang had never tasted defeat in a chef's challenge. His momentum was really terrifying. If Mu Qing wanted to defeat Bufang in the chef's challenge, it would be a little difficult. Of course, Lu Jelly was still somewhat familiar with Mu Qing. Although she was the only woman on the tablet of gluttony, her culinary skills were extremely terrifying. This was because Mu Qing had the 100-flavor spirit tongue that ordinary chefs envied. The so-called 100-flavor spirit tongue was able to accurately taste every flavor in a dish. Moreover, it knew the strength of each flavor. Moreover, it was extremely sensitive to flavors. With the 100-flavor spirit tongue, Mu Qing also had a famous knife that was even more famous than Yen Yu's shadow-chopping knife, the profound theory knife. This was an extremely ancient famous knife. It seemed to have existed before the Valley of Gluttony was established. Although everyone knew that Mu Qing had this famous knife, no one had ever seen her use it. Lu Jelly was a little curious. He did not know if Bufang would be able to force Mu Qing to take out the profound theory knife. Mu Qing's style of cooking was incomparably exquisite. It was as though she was creating a work of art. Her taste and knife skills were very strict. Many of her skills were very exquisite. In the Valley of Gluttony, there was a very accurate evaluation of Mu Qing's culinary skills. It was said that Mu Qing was a master of mechanisms that surpassed the heavens. She was not a chef. The corners of Wenren Shang's mouth curled up. He poured a mouthful of thick bamboo wine into his mouth, laughing loudly as he looked at Mu Qing. "Big Sister Mu, it seems like the one who will have a headache next is you." Mu Qing's eyes instantly widened. "Who are you calling Big Sister? Your whole family is Big Sister." Mu Qing coldly snorted. Then, she swayed her body and left. No matter what, Bufang had still brought her some pressure. This pressure made her very excited. In this chef's challenge, it seemed like she would have to use all her strength. Ancient Jade Holy Land. The ancient Jade Great Hall stood proudly on the peak of the ancient Jade Mountain. It was made of gold bricks and jade tiles, and it looked majestic. That great hall was extremely gorgeous and dazzling. From afar, it looked as though it was emitting light. This light shot up to the sky, extremely dazzling, attracting the gazes of countless people. In the ancient Jade Mountain, there was a white jade staircase that led directly to the peak, directly to that great hall. On that white jade staircase, many people kowtowed 3 times and kowtowed 9 times. With incomparable sincerity, they walked toward that great hall. That ancient jade hall was like a holy land, attracting countless devout believers. The ancient Jade Hall was the center of the ancient Jade Holy Land. The entire Great Hall was built with rare and precious minerals. It was incomparably exquisite, emitting light. Moreover, the walls and stone pillars of the Great Hall were engraved with mysterious arrays. These arrays revolved, constantly emitting a terrifying pressure. In the center of the Great Hall, a figure wearing a long golden robe sat cross-legged in the void. Around the figure's body, there were several circular formations revolving around him. Suddenly, that figure's eyes opened. It was as though the void was collapsing and collapsing. The surrounding arrays began to revolve rapidly. The revolving speed was so fast that even the void seemed to be unable to withstand it. Buzz, a figure dashed in from the outside and knelt on the ground. "Saint Sovereign, do you have any orders?" It was in existence at the quasi-divine spirit realm from the ancient Jade Holy Land. He was wearing armor, holding a long mace in his hand. His face was full of respect as he knelt in front of the Great Hall. Behind him, there were many experts from the ancient Jade Holy Land kneeling. Through the Great Hall, one could see the white stone steps of the ancient Jade Mountain. Zealous worshippers were climbing up the mountain path, their faces filled with excitement and longing. The disciple I sent to the Valley of Gluttony is dead. My clone was also killed by someone. I can feel wisps of nether energy from the existence who killed my clone. The Saint Sovereign's eyes were like the bright stars in the night sky, causing the void to collapse unceasingly. That terrifying pressure and power made the hearts of the people kneeling in front of him shiver. What? There's nether energy? Isn't that a netherworld creature? A netherworld creature that could kill the Saint Sovereign's clone? How could it appear on the continent? The expert holding the long mace had a face full of shock. The Saint Sovereign's eyes turned, and it was as though the void had collapsed. His gaze landed on that expert, making him feel as though his body was being pressed by a heavy mountain. It was so heavy that he almost couldn't breathe. Do you think I would lie to you? I don't need you to believe me. You just need to investigate for me. Once you find anything, come back and report to me, the Saint Sovereign said calmly. That expert's heart instantly shivered. His face changed, and he hurriedly lowered his head, not daring to look at the Saint Sovereign's eyes. Yes, this subordinate understands. Go. There's no need to create more trouble. You just need to check if it's a netherworld creature. If it is, the Saint Sovereign said. As he reached the end of his words, his tone suddenly became cold. With a cold snort, the surrounding array began to tremble, and the void seemed as though it was about to collapse. The expert holding the long mace slowly retreated out of the great hall. The rotation of the array in the great hall also gradually slowed down. The Great Path's principle is weakening. These netherworld creatures are becoming more and more lawless. Bu Fang returned to the inn. The Lord Go was still lying on the ground, snoring loudly. The fat on his body slightly trembled as he inhaled and exhaled. Bu Fang returned to his room, sitting on a chair to rest for a while. He brewed a pot of tea and poured a cup for everyone. Yu sat beside Bu Fang, her hands holding a cup of tea as she gently sipped on it. Hades' era was currently concerned about how to eat the spicy strip. Hence, he did not have any mood to drink tea with Bu Fang. Bu Fang, on the other hand, was not in a hurry. He took a sip of tea and calmed his breath. He gave Nether King Ha an indifferent look, then stood up and walked toward the kitchen. He needed to prepare and think about the dish he would prepare for tomorrow's chef's challenge. His opponent for tomorrow's chef's challenge was Mu Cheng. Regarding this woman, Bu Fang did not know much. However, Bu Fang knew that her culinary skills were definitely not bad. As for the theme of the chef's challenge, it was stewing soup. Soup had always been the #1 category of cooking, and stewing soup was a cooking method that had a lot of research value. Bu Fang also liked to stew soup, but he rarely did so. Hence, tomorrow's chef's challenge would be a huge test for him. Since Mu Qing dared to bring up this theme, she naturally had her own confidence. Hence, if Bu Fang did not prepare, he might really lose. However, what kind of soup should he stew tomorrow? Stewing soup required ingredients and spirit herbs. Both of them were indispensable. Of course, he also needed kitchen utensils to stew soup. However, Bu Fang had the Black Turtle constellation walk, so he did not need to worry about the so-called kitchen utensils. Bu Fang did not believe that there would be any kitchen utensils more awesome than the God of Cooking set. After pacing around the kitchen for a while, Bu Fang's gaze once again landed on his shoulder. He saw Xiaopi, who was leisurely spitting bubbles. Xiaopi's ability was quite useful. It could increase the effectiveness of the ingredients, making the taste even more delicious, and the effects even more obvious. Hence, this time, Xiaopi still could not be missing. However, other than Xiaopi, Bu Fang felt that the most important thing was deciding which soup to stew. Suddenly, a bright light flashed in Bu Fang's eyes, and the corners of his mouth curled up, revealing a meaningful smile. He knew what soup he should stew. In front of this dish, everything else was just fleeting clouds. Bu Fang gently exhaled. Green smoke twirled, and then, the dragon bone kitchen knife spun in his hand. The next day, early morning. Valley of Gluttony, Phoenix Pavilion. The Phoenix Pavilion was the location of today's chef's challenge. The owner of the Phoenix Pavilion was Mu Cheng. As a special grade chef, how could she not have her own restaurant in the Valley of Gluttony? That was because the news of the Phoenix Pavilion's special grade chef Mu Cheng's chef's challenge had spread. The originally crowded Phoenix Pavilion became even more bustling. It was so crowded that not even a drop of water could trickle through. The sun was high up in the sky. The crowd instantly parted to form a path. Bu Fong wore a striped red and white vermilion robe. He clasped his hands behind his back, his face expressionless as he slowly walked over. On his shoulder, there was a golden shrimpy that was spitting bubbles. As he stepped forward, Bu Fong's eyes instantly became serious. Bu Fong raised his head, looking straight at the second floor. On the second floor, there was a voluptuous figure standing. This figure was Mu Cheng, who had prepared for an entire day and night. Today, Mu Cheng wore a formal chef's robe, which covered her voluptuous figure. However, it made her look even more mature and charming. This woman's gaze was incomparably attractive. She raised her hand, and a strangely shaped kitchen knife appeared in her hand. At this moment, the hustle and bustle stopped. Everyone looked at Bu Fong and Mu Cheng with shock and excitement. They were all looking forward to the start of this intense chef's challenge. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.